Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Have you ever wondered what makes those sounds when you're alone in a building? The first time I heard the voices, I convinced myself it was just the wind. It had to be. All 23 children in Little Acorns Kindergarten were accounted for, sitting cross-legged in our reading circle as I turned the pages of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I'd been teaching at this rural Kentucky kindergarten for just 3 weeks, and everything about the place still felt foreign to me. The converted Victorian house sat nestled between rolling hills and a small patch of woods, its withered red brick exterior giving way to creaking hardwood floors and too many hidden corners. Most of the staff had been here for decades, their faces as familiar to the local parents as their own relatives. Then there was me, Emma Hayes, 32, fresh from my divorce and desperate for a new start in a town where nobody knew my name or my failures. "Miss Emma?" A small voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Lily, her blonde pigtails slightly lopsided from playground roughhousing. "Can we have snack time now?" I smiled, pushing away the memory of that strange, distant whispering. "Of course, sweetheart. Everyone, put your reading mats away neatly." As the children bustled around, I caught Principal Matthews passing by the doorway. Her silver-streaked bun was pulled so tightly it seemed to lift the corners of her eyes, giving her a perpetually suspicious expression. "How are you settling in, Miss Hayes?" she asked, not quite stepping into the classroom. "Wonderfully," I lied. "The children are delightful." Principal Matthews nodded, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Just a reminder, the basement storage is off limits without proper authorization. The janitor mentioned the light was on yesterday morning." "Oh." I frowned. "I haven't been down there at all." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, someone has. Please remind your assistant as well." As she walked away, I felt a chill creep up my spine. I didn't have an assistant. The sound came again during nap time. This time, there was no mistaking it for wind or pipes or any of the other excuses I'd made for myself earlier. It was a child's laugh, high-pitched, delighted, and distinctly coming from beneath the floorboards. I froze, my hands clutching the storybook I'd been about to shelve. The classroom was dim, afternoon sunlight filtered through paper cutouts of autumn leaves we taped to the windows. 23 children lay on their mats, most of them asleep, a few quietly fidgeting with their blankets. All accounted for. "All right here." The laugh bubbled up again, followed by a shushing sound that raised the hair on my arms. I set the book down and moved silently toward the old supply closet at the back of the room. Janitor Mike had mentioned it housed one of the access points to the basement. The door creaked as I pulled it open, revealing mops, cleaning supplies, and a narrow door in the rear wall. "Miss Hayes?" A whisper from behind made me jump. It was Tyler, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What are you doing?" "Just checking on something, sweetheart," I whispered back. "Go back to your mat." He padded back to his place, and I closed the closet door, my heart racing. The laughter had stopped. That evening, after the last child had been collected, I sat at my desk grading coloring activities and trying to forget about the sounds. The school had emptied quickly as it always did on Fridays, the other teachers eager to start their weekends. Only the occasional creak of the old building kept me company. Until the singing started. A small voice, singing what sounded like a nursery rhyme, drifted up from below. The melody was familiar, but the words were wrong, jumbled, and nonsensical. Round and round the cobbler's bench, the children chased the rabbit. One fell down and never came up. I stood so quickly my chair toppled backward. The singing stopped abruptly. My rational mind offered explanations, a radio left on by the maintenance staff, recordings from one of the classrooms playing on a timer, even kids from the neighborhood playing near an open basement window. But deep down, I knew none of these were true. I gathered my belongings with trembling hands and headed for the door, determined to leave whatever lurked beneath the floorboards to its own devices. As I reached for the light switch, a small voice, different from the singing one, called out from below. "Miss Emma, will you come play with us? We've been waiting for you." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told the children my first name. I didn't walk to my car, I ran. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice calling my name, small and plaintive yet somehow wrong. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and the creaky acoustics of an old building. I spent Saturday cleaning my small apartment, running errands, doing anything to keep my mind occupied. On Sunday evening, I drove past Little Acorns. I told myself it was just to prepare mentally for the week ahead, but deep down, I knew I was checking if any lights shone from the basement windows that ring the foundation just above ground level. They were all dark. Monday arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle that matched my mood. I arrived early, determined to speak with Janitor Mike about the basement. I found him mopping the main hallway, his weathered face creasing into a smile as I approached. "Morning, Miss Hayes. Ready for another week with the little tornadoes?" I forced a laugh. "Always." "Hey, Mike, I was wondering about the basement. Principal Matthews mentioned something about the lights being on." His mop stopped mid-stroke. "You haven't been down there, have you?" The intensity of his question caught me off guard. "No, I haven't." He resumed mopping, but slower now. "Good. Best keep it that way. That place has problems." "What kind of problems?" Mike glanced around before leaning closer. "Building's over 100 years old. Used to be an orphanage before it was a school. The basement was where they kept the sick kids." He shrugged. "Probably nothing to those old stories, but the plumbing makes strange noises, and the wiring's not right. Principal doesn't like anyone going down there without permission. Have you heard?" I hesitated, feeling foolish. "Have you heard sounds? Like children?" His eyes widened slightly before his expression shuddered. "Just the pipes, Miss Hayes. Old buildings talk, but they don't say anything worth listening to." He wheeled his mop bucket away, effectively ending our conversation. The morning passed without incident. We made paper plate fish for art, practiced counting to 20, and started learning about the water cycle. Normal, safe, kindergarten activities. I found myself relaxing as the hours ticked by. During lunch, I sat with Bethany Williams, who taught the other kindergarten class. She'd been at Little Acorns for 27 years and considered herself the unofficial historian of the school. "Bethany," I asked casually, "what do you know about the basement?" She paused mid-bite into her sandwich. "Who's been talking to you about the basement?" "Just curious. The building has such history." Bethany set down her sandwich, appetite apparently gone. We don't use most of it anymore. Too damp, too many code violations to fix. There's just some old supplies and holiday decorations stored down there now. Have you ever heard anything strange from down there? Her expression tightened. Like what? I don't know. Voices? Children's voices? Emma. She reached across the table to grasp my hand. Her fingers were cold. Listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you heard, you didn't. This job is stressful, especially for newcomers. Our minds play tricks when we're tired. But, no. Her grip tightened painfully. This isn't the first time someone's asked about voices. 2 years ago, we had a young teacher, bright and talented like you. She became obsessed with the basement. Started staying late, saying she needed to help them. She had a breakdown right in the middle of class. The children were traumatized. She released my hand and stood. Take my advice. Focus on your students, the real ones, right in front of you. Forget about the basement. The afternoon dragged on, each minute stretching like taffy. I found myself straining to hear anything unusual, but the only sounds were the normal chaos of 23 5-year-olds learning to write their names. As I was helping Tyler zip his backpack at dismissal time, he looked up at me with solemn brown eyes. Miss Hayes, why are there kids in the basement? My hands froze on his zipper. What do you mean, Tyler? I heard them at nap time again. They were calling your name. There are no children in the basement, sweetie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's just the pipes making funny noises. He shook his head with the absolute certainty only a child can possess. No, they're kids. They said they've been there a long, long time. They said they want to play with us. His voice dropped to a whisper. They said soon you'll let them come up. A car horn honked outside, Tyler's mother. I helped him finish with his backpack, my hands trembling. As he walked away, he turned back. They know your name is Emma, he said. They know all our names. After all the children had gone, I sat at my desk, Tyler's words echoing in my head. Part of me wanted to race to my car and never return. Another part, a part one didn't quite recognize, felt drawn to the supply closet door. Just check, that part whispered. Just make sure. I found myself standing in front of the closet before I consciously decided to move. My hand reached for the knob, turned it slowly. The closet smelled of bleach and dust. The narrow door at the back stood slightly ajar. Had it been open before? I couldn't remember. I pushed it wider, revealing a set of steep wooden stairs disappearing into darkness. Cool air wafted up, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something sickeningly sweet, like overripe fruit. Hello? I called down, my voice small and tight. Is anyone there? Silence answered me. Then, just as I was about to close the door, a soft shuffling sound. Like small feet moving across a dirt floor. We're here, Miss Emma, came a chorus of whispered voices. We're always here. Won't you come down and play? I slammed the door shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the wood, muffled but distinct, came the sound of children laughing. I didn't go straight home that night. Instead, I drove to the county library, a small brick building with fluorescent lighting that buzzed like angry insects. The elderly librarian looked surprised to have a visitor so close to closing time. Can I help you find something? She asked, peering over half-moon glasses. I'm researching local history, I said. Specifically, the building that's now Little Acorns Kindergarten. I heard it used to be an orphanage. Something flickered across her face, recognition, then concern. The Willoughby Home for Children. Closed in 1958. She hesitated. You work at the kindergarten, don't you? You're the new teacher. I nodded, surprised. How did you know? Small town. She sighed heavily. We get one of you every few years. New teacher, curious about the voices. My mouth went dry. What voices? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she disappeared into the back room and returned with a bound volume of old newspapers and a thin folder. Career Journal archives and some local records. The orphanage closed after the incident. It's all in there. What incident? She checked her watch. Library closes in 15 minutes. You can make copies if you need them. Then she walked away, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking against the linoleum. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The first item was a yellow newspaper clipping from December 12, 1957. Tragedy at local orphanage, 5 children missing, feared dead. The article described how 5 children, ages 4 to 6, disappeared from the Willoughby home during a bitter winter storm. Initial searches found no trace of them. Authorities suspected they might have wandered into the woods and succumbed to the cold, but no bodies were ever recovered. The next clipping, dated 3 months later, reported the orphanage's closure following persistent disturbances and complaints of unusual phenomena. The final paragraph mentioned that several staff members had reported hearing children's voices and laughter coming from the basement, despite all remaining children being accounted for upstairs. I made photocopies with numb fingers, then drove home in a daze. That night, I dreamed of 5 small shadows standing at the foot of my bed, whispering my name. The next day, I struggled to maintain normality. I smiled, read stories, and helped with finger paintings while my mind churned with what I'd discovered. During recess, I noticed Tyler standing alone by the fence, watching the basement windows instead of playing. At nap time, I heard it again, not just laughter this time, but a soft, rhythmic tapping, like small fingers drumming against the underside of the floor. It seemed to follow me as I moved around the classroom, always directly beneath my feet. After school, I found Principal Matthews waiting by my car. Miss Hayes, she said, her voice clipped. A word, please. My stomach dropped. Of course. The librarian called me. She was concerned about your research interests. Her thin lips pressed together. This is not the first time we've had staff become fixated on the building's history. It never ends well. I was just curious. Curiosity is one thing. Obsession is another. Her eyes bored into mine. We've had to let teachers go before. Teachers who couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries between history and the present. Between reality and fantasy. Are you threatening my job? Her expression softened slightly. I'm trying to protect you, Emma. And the children. Whatever you think you're hearing, it's not real. But if you keep pursuing it, if you let it affect your teaching, that will have very real consequences. She turned to go, then paused. The basement is off limits. If I find you've gone down there, termination will be immediate. Am I clear? I nodded stiffly, watching her walk to her car. As she drove away, I noticed Tyler still on the playground, his mother chatting with another parent by the gate. He was staring at me, his small face solemn. Then he pointed toward the ground and slowly shook his head. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the photocopies, trying to make sense of it all. There was no mention of what happened to the 5 missing children. No follow-up, no resolution. Just 5 young lives erased, as if they'd never existed. I jumped at a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Mike the janitor, still in his gray work uniform. "Miss Hayes," he called. "Need to talk to you. It's important." I opened the door cautiously. "Mike, how did you know where I live?" "School records." He looked nervously over his shoulder. "Can I come in?" "Don't want to be seen." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He refused to sit, standing awkwardly in my small living room. "Principal doesn't know I'm here," he said, twisting his cap in his hands. "But I heard her talking to you. Thought you should know the whole story." "About the orphanage?" He nodded. "My grandfather worked there as a handyman. He was there when those kids disappeared." I gestured to the photocopies. The newspaper said they might have wandered into the woods. Mike's laugh was bitter. "That's what they told the papers. Truth is, those kids were hiding in the basement. There was a game they played, hide and seek in the dark. Staff didn't know about the hidden room." "Hidden room?" "Behind the coal chute. Old part of the basement nobody used anymore. Those 5 kids found it, made it their secret clubhouse. When the storm hit that night, they snuck down to hide there." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "What happened to them?" Mike's eyes were haunted. "Cave-in. Part of the foundation collapsed in the storm. By the time anyone realized the kids were missing, it was too late. They were already buried." "They found the bodies?" He shook his head. "Never dug them out. Too dangerous, they said. Just sealed off that section of the basement. My grandfather said it was really because they started hearing things. The children laughing and playing, like they didn't know they were dead." He swallowed hard. "After a while, the voices changed. Started calling to the living children upstairs. Some of the kids said their missing friends were asking them to come down and play." I felt sick. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand, those voices aren't just pipes or imagination. Everyone who works there long enough hears them eventually. Most learn to ignore them. The ones who don't." He trailed off. "What happens to them?" His expression darkened. "They start listening. Start believing. Then the voices get stronger, start making demands. The teacher before you, Bethany mentioned her. Said she had a breakdown." Mike's laugh was humorless. "That's one way of putting it. She tried to lead her entire class into the basement during a fire drill. Said the children below were lonely and needed friends." He moved toward the door. "Just wanted you to know what you're dealing with. Don't listen to the voices, Miss Hayes. No matter what they promise or how sad they sound. They're not children anymore, not really." After he left, I sat in the dark, his words echoing in my mind. I must have fallen asleep on the couch because I jerked awake at 3 in the morning, heart pounding. In the silence of my apartment, a child's voice whispered from the heating vent. "Miss Emma? We found your address. We can visit you now too." A soft giggle, then silence. I called in sick the next day. Principal Matthew's voice on the phone was skeptical but not suspicious, yet. I spent the morning pacing my apartment, jumping at every creak and settling pipe. No more voices came from the vents, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. By afternoon, restlessness drove me out. I found myself parking across the street from Little Acorns, watching his parents arrive for afternoon pickup. The children spilled out into the yard, their bright jackets like autumn leaves against the gray sky. Tyler was the last to emerge, walking slowly beside a substitute teacher I didn't recognize. Unlike the other children, he wasn't running to greet his mother. Instead, he scanned the street until his eyes found my car. Even from a distance, I could see the fear on his small face. Before I could think better of it, I was out of my car and crossing the street. Tyler's mother looked up in surprise as I approached. "Miss Hayes? I thought you were sick today." "Feeling a bit better," I lied. "Tyler, could I talk to you for a minute?" His mother frowned. "Is everything okay?" "Just a quick question about the project he was working on yesterday," I said, forcing a smile. She nodded reluctantly, and I crouched down to Tyler's level. "The kids in the basement," I whispered. "Did they talk to you again?" His lower lip trembled. "They're mad at you for not coming to school today. They said they visited your house instead." I slid down my spine. "Did they say anything else?" He nodded, glancing nervously at his mother, who was checking her phone. "They said you have to help them come up." "They said..." He hesitated. "They said if you don't help them, they'll find someone who will." "What does that mean?" His voice dropped even lower. "I think they want me to help them now. I heard them during nap time. They know where I live too." Tyler's mother called him then, and he ran to her, not looking back. I watched them drive away, a decision crystallizing in my mind. This had to end tonight. I waited until the school emptied, then parked behind the building where my car wouldn't be visible from the street. The back door was always left unlocked for the evening cleaning crew. I slipped inside, the familiar smell of crayons and disinfectant now sinister in the dimming light. My classroom was eerily silent, the children's artwork on the walls seeming to watch me as I moved to the supply closet. This time, I didn't hesitate at the inner door. I pulled it open and stood at the top of the stairs, listening. Nothing. I flicked on my flashlight and began to descend. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, each one louder than the last, announcing my presence to whatever waited below. The main basement was disappointingly ordinary: concrete floors, exposed pipes, rows of metal shelving stacked with dusty holiday decorations and spare classroom supplies. My flashlight beam caught the gleam of the old coal chute Mike had mentioned, now sealed with a newer metal door. As I approached it, the air grew noticeably colder. I placed my hand against the metal. It was like touching ice. "I know you're there," I said, my voice echoing in the empty basement. "I know what happened to you." Silence. "I'm sorry you're trapped here. I'm sorry no one helped you." A soft sigh seemed to ripple through the room, like multiple people exhaling at once. Miss Emma came to play, a voice whispered from behind the door. Not one voice, I realized, but many, speaking in perfect unison. Miss Emma came to help us. "What do you want?" I asked, my mouth dry. "We want to come up." The voices were eager now, excited. "We want to play with the others. We've been good. We've waited so long." "You can't come up," I said, trying to sound firm despite my trembling voice. You don't belong up there anymore. A rhythmic tapping started against the other side of the door. 5 distinct patterns, like 5 small hands knocking. Not fair, the voices said, no longer sweet but petulant. The others get to play upstairs. We have to stay down here in the dark. All alone. For so long. I'm sorry, but we want to come up. The voices rose to a shriek that made me stumble backward. The tapping became pounding, violently shaking the metal door on its hinges. Let us out, Miss Emma. Let us out. I turned to run back to the stairs, but stopped cold. Tyler stood at the bottom step, still wearing his blue jacket from earlier. Tyler? I whispered. What are you doing here? His expression was blank, eyes unfocused. They called me back. They said I could play with them if I helped. Tyler, listen to me. You need to go upstairs right now. He shook his head slowly. They just want friends, Miss Emma. They're lonely. He walked past me toward the metal door where the pounding had stopped. Tyler, no! I lunged for him, but an invisible force threw me back against the shelving units. Pain exploded along my spine as metal dug into flesh. Tyler reached for the door's handle, his movements mechanical. Behind the door, the voices had begun to sing. Round and round the basement door, 5 children trapped forevermore. One fell down. One fell down. But soon we all come up. Tyler, please. I screamed, struggling to stand. They're not children anymore. He paused, blinking as if waking from a dream. Miss Emma? The singing stopped abruptly. The temperature plunged so rapidly my breath clouded in front of me. Traitor, the voices hissed, no longer childlike but distorted and raging. We'll take you anyway. The metal door began to bulge outward, the hinges screaming under impossible pressure. Tyler screamed as the handle he was still touching turned ice cold, freezing his skin to the metal. I threw myself forward, grabbing him around the waist and pulling with all my strength. His hand tore free with a sickening sound, leaving skin behind. We collapsed together as the door burst open. They emerged from the darkness, not solid forms but shadows darker than the surrounding blackness, vaguely child-shaped but wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs bent at impossible angles. Where faces should have been, only deeper darkness swirled. Run! I screamed, pushing Tyler toward the stairs. We scrambled upward, the temperature dropping with each step as the shadow children pursued us. Their whispers filled the air, no longer sweet but venomous. You promised to help us, Miss Emma. You promised. I never promised you anything. I shouted back, reaching the top of the stairs and slamming the closet door shut behind us. It shuddered violently as something crashed against it from the other side. I dragged Tyler through the classroom and into the hallway. The lights were flickering wildly, dimming with each impact against the closet door. We reached the back exit just as a tremendous crash echoed from my classroom. The door had given way. The night air hit us like a blessing as we burst outside. I fumbled with my car keys, Tyler sobbing beside me, clutching his injured hand. Get in! I screamed, throwing open the passenger door. As Tyler climbed in, I looked back at the school. Dark shapes were pressing against the classroom windows, their not-quite hands leaving frost patterns on the glass. One by one, the windows began to shatter. I drove away with tires squealing, Tyler's terrified face illuminated by the dashboard lights. In the rearview mirror, I watched 5 shadow children emerge onto the lawn of Little Acorns Kindergarten. Then they were gone, dissolving into the night like smoke. I didn't return to Little Acorns. No one did. The fire that consumed the building that night was ruled an electrical fault, though the investigators couldn't explain why the flames had started in 5 different places simultaneously, or why they burned so cold that firefighters reported frost forming on their equipment. Tyler's injuries were blamed on the fire, his confused story attributed to trauma and smoke inhalation. His family moved away soon after. I found a new teaching position 2 states over. Sometimes, while I'm alone in my classroom after hours, I find myself listening for sounds beneath the floorboards. So far, I've heard nothing but the normal creaks of an aging building. But I never stay after dark. And I never, ever go into the basement. Last week, a new child joined my class. He's quiet, keeps to himself during recess. Yesterday, he looked up from his drawing, 5 stick figures holding hands, and asked me a question that made my blood freeze. "Miss Emma, why are there kids in the basement?" I'm turning in my resignation tomorrow. The air was thick with tension as I stepped into the post office. It was an ordinary day in Maryland, or at least it seemed that way. But the moment I entered, a strange feeling settled over me, a sense that something was off. The usual hum of conversation was replaced by a haunting silence. I was the new postal worker, Emma, trying to find my place in this small town. As I sorted through the pile of letters and packages, one envelope caught my eye. It was different. No return address, no stamp, just a plain white envelope with a wax seal. My heart raced as I picked it up. There was something almost sinister about it. Inside, I found a photograph of a man with tousled hair and a weary expression. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Alongside the picture was a note, hastily written, "Help me, I'm still here." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this man? Why was he asking for help? I glanced around the post office, my unease growing. The other workers were busy, unaware of the weight of the message I held. I tucked the envelope into my pocket, deciding to investigate later. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone was waiting for me to act. As days went by, I received more envelopes. Each one contained a different photo and a similar plea. My life became consumed with the mystery. I started to piece together clues, researching the names and places linked to the man in the photos. Each discovery only deepened my anxiety. With every envelope, the atmosphere around me shifted. Sounds that once felt ordinary now echoed ominously. Footsteps that were once just the hustle of the post office morphed into a heartbeat, thrumming in my ears. I could no longer dismiss the odd shadows that seemed to flicker in the corners of my vision. I became obsessed, poring over maps and old newspaper clippings. The man in the photos had gone missing years ago, but the trail led nowhere. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The walls of my small apartment closed in on me, and sleep eluded me. I began to hear whispers in the silence, shadows danced in the dark. It all came to a head one night. I was alone in the post office, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously. The last envelope lay before me, its presence suffocating. I opened it, my hands trembling. The photo showed a desolate street corner, the same place where I had seen the man in my dreams. I felt a pull, an urgency to go there, to confront whatever lay waiting for me. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, the world felt different. The familiar streets morphed into a labyrinth of shadows. I felt a presence behind me, an unseen watcher. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, I saw it, a figure lurking in the darkness. It was the man from the photos, but his face was twisted in anguish. He raised a hand, and I felt a surge of terror wash over me. I had crossed a line, delving too deep into a mystery that was never meant to be uncovered. I stumbled backward, breathless, my mind racing. The last thing I saw was his pleading eyes before everything went black. When I awoke, I was back in the post office, the early morning light flooding through the windows. Had it been a dream? The envelope lay on my desk, untouched. But the feeling of dread lingered. I had survived physically, but my mind was another story. The questions loomed like dark clouds. Was this a plea for help or a trap set by a predator? And who was watching me now? The truth was out there, but it felt just out of reach, waiting for me to step closer into the unknown. I blinked against the harsh light filtering through the post office windows, my heart still racing. It felt like I had been pulled from a deep, dark void. I sat up slowly, trying to piece together what had just happened. The cool, sterile environment of the post office now felt strangely suffocating. The envelopes sat quietly on my desk, each one a reminder of the chaos that had enveloped my life. I rubbed my temples, attempting to shake off the remnants of the dream or nightmare as it now felt. The man's face haunted me, his eyes wide with desperation. What did he want? Why had he chosen me? I took a deep breath and picked up the first envelope again, the familiar weight of it both comforting and terrifying. I carefully removed the photograph and the note, feeling the texture of the paper beneath my fingertips. The image showed him in a park, surrounded by trees. In the background, a distant figure loomed, barely visible. I squinted at the picture, trying to discern any details. My heart raced anew as I recognized the area. It was just a few blocks from where I lived. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided I would go there. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the street. It felt like a scene from a movie, the kind where you know something ominous is about to unfold. As I walked, the unease settled in again. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves felt like a whisper, every passing car a potential threat. The street that had once felt so familiar began to morph into a maze of uncertainty. My mind raced with thoughts of the man, the mystery wrapped around him like a shroud. Upon reaching the park, I took a moment to gather myself. The trees stood tall, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, casting strange shadows that danced on the ground. I approached the spot from the photograph, my heart thudding loudly in my chest. The bench was empty, and the eerie silence wrapped around me like a fog. I looked around, searching for any signs, anything that would help me understand what was happening. That's when I noticed something on the ground. A piece of paper, crumpled and partially buried beneath the leaves. I knelt down and picked it up, my fingers trembling. It was another note, but this one was different. The handwriting was frantic, almost scrawled in a hurry. They are watching. Don't trust anyone. My stomach dropped. Who was they? My mind raced with possibilities. I had already been drawn into a web of mystery and danger, and now it seemed I was not alone in this unsettling game. As I stood up, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, half expecting to see the man from the photos, but there was nothing. Just the quiet park, eerily still. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the creeping paranoia. It was just my imagination, I told myself. I needed to focus. With a deep breath, I decided to investigate further. I wandered deeper into the park, looking for any clues that could lead me to the man or answers about his plight. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like fingers grasping at the sky. Each step I took seemed to echo, amplifying the silence around me. As I moved forward, the atmosphere grew thicker. A cold breeze whispered through the leaves, sending a shiver down my spine. I could almost hear the whispers again, faint but insistent. I pushed through the unease and kept walking. Then, I stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center was an old stone circle, weathered by time. My heart raced as I approached it. Was this a part of the ancient rituals hinted at in the envelopes? I knelt to examine the stones, running my fingers over the rough surface. They felt alive, as if they held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Suddenly, a sharp crack of a twig broke the silence. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I turned quickly, scanning the area for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just the whispering wind and the rustling leaves. But then I heard it, a low murmur, almost like chanting. The sound was distant, yet it sent chills racing down my spine. I strained to listen, trying to discern the words. The chanting grew louder, echoing through the trees. I could feel a pull, a compulsion to follow the sound. It was as if it called to something deep within me. I took a step back, torn between the need to investigate and the instinct to run. Just as I was about to turn away, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, shadowy and indistinct, flitted between the trees. My breath caught in my throat. With adrenaline surging, I took off, my legs moving faster than my mind could process. The sound of chanting grew louder, echoing around me, merging with my racing heartbeat. I dashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at my clothes, as I tried to escape whatever was pursuing me. I burst out of the trees and onto the street, gasping for breath. The world around me felt surreal, as if I had emerged from a nightmare into a waking dream. The park was behind me, but the memory of the chanting lingered, echoing in my mind. I had uncovered something much darker than I anticipated. I had felt their presence, whoever they were, and the weight of their gaze was heavy upon me. As I made my way back home, I knew one thing for certain: I was in deeper than I had ever imagined, and the shadows were closing in. The question loomed over me like a storm cloud: would I find the truth, or would the truth find me first? The streets felt foreign as I made my way back home, the familiar sights of my neighborhood warped by the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Each house, every porch light flickering in the gathering dusk, seemed to loom over me like silent sentinels, hiding secrets I could no longer ignore. The morning's tranquility had vanished, replaced by a suffocating sense of dread that wrapped around me like a shroud. I pushed open the door to my apartment, the familiar creak of the hinges sounding like a warning. Inside, the walls felt closer, the shadows deeper. I flicked on the lights, illuminating the cluttered space. Papers were strewn across my small dining table, each one a reminder of the madness I had become embroiled in. The envelopes lay there, like silent witnesses to my descent into chaos. I needed to think, to regroup. I sat down, surrounded by the remnants of my investigation. I spread the envelopes out before me, each one a piece of a puzzle I had yet to solve. The photographs seemed to stare back at me, their subjects trapped in a silent plea. The man in the photos was a ghost, yet I could feel his presence in every fiber of my being. I rifled through the papers, searching for anything that could provide clarity. My eyes landed on the last note I had found in the park. They are watching. Don't trust anyone. The words echoed in my mind, twisting and turning like a dark vine. Who were they? And why was I being pulled into this web? As I pondered, a sudden noise interrupted my thoughts. It was a faint scratching sound, barely audible, coming from the front door. My heart raced as I rose to investigate, each step heavy with trepidation. I approached the door slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing. The hallway outside was empty, the overhead light casting long shadows that danced along the walls. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then, the scratching came again, more insistent this time. Against my better judgment, I opened the door just a crack. My breath hitched as I saw a small package lying on the doormat, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. I bent down, my hand shaking as I picked it up. There was no return address, no indication of who might have sent it. My pulse quickened. Was this a trap or another clue? I closed the door behind me, the sound echoing in the stillness of my apartment. I set the package on the table and stared at it, waiting for something to happen, for some revelation to unfold. After a few moments of contemplation, I tore away the twine and pulled off the paper. Inside was a small, intricately carved box made of dark wood, its surface glistening in the light. Curiosity tinged with fear washed over me as I lifted the lid. Inside lay an assortment of items, a rusted key, an old compass, and a worn-out notebook filled with scrawled notes and sketches. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages, the handwriting frantic and disjointed. The entries detailed strange occurrences, shadows moving on their own, whispers in the night, and a recurring figure that seemed to stalk the writer. One passage caught my eye. They gather at the old stone circle. They speak of the forgotten. Beware the watchers. They are always near. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. This was no ordinary diary. It was a record of someone's descent into madness, someone who had faced the same shadows I now felt closing in around me. Suddenly, the scratching sound returned, this time louder and more insistent. My heart raced as I jumped up, looking toward the window. A dark figure stood just beyond the glass, shrouded in shadows. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze piercing through me, suffocating in its intensity. Panic surged within me. Who was this person? What did they want? I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair in my haste. I glanced around for something to defend myself with, but there was nothing within reach. The figure outside shifted slightly, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of recognition in the darkness, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Gathering my courage, I approached the window, heart pounding. As I looked out, the figure was gone. I opened the window, trying to catch a glimpse of where they might have gone, but the night was quiet. My breath fogged the glass, mingling with the growing sense of unease. I slammed the window shut and turned back to the box on the table. The key and the compass seemed to shimmer under the light, almost beckoning me to take action. What did they unlock? What secrets lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed? With newfound determination, I grabbed the items and set out to the old stone circle once more. I needed answers, and the only way to find them was to confront whatever lay in the depths of the shadows. As I stepped out into the night, the air felt charged, electric with anticipation and fear. The path to the park was dimly lit, the streetlights flickering as if struggling against the encroaching darkness. Each step felt heavy, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned my head frequently, half expecting to see the figure lurking just behind me. As I reached the park, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. The trees stood like sentinels, and the stone circle loomed in the distance, a beacon of the unknown. The chanting echoed faintly in my mind, pulling me forward. I had to know the truth. I approached the stone circle cautiously, the ground uneven beneath my feet. As I stepped into the center, I held the key tightly in my hand, the compass resting against my palm. The air felt thick, charged with energy. I could hear the whispering wind, almost as if it were trying to communicate something vital. Kneeling down, I examined the stones closely. They were ancient, covered in moss and lichen, their surfaces worn smooth by time. I could almost feel the history they held, the secrets they had witnessed. I closed my eyes, allowing the atmosphere to envelop me, listening for any sign of the chanting. Suddenly, I felt a shift in the air, a cold breeze brushing against my skin. The whispers grew louder, clearer, and the ground beneath me seemed to vibrate with anticipation. I opened my eyes, scanning the area. The shadows danced, flickering at the edges of my vision. And then, from the darkness, the figure emerged once more. This time, I could see it more clearly, a silhouette of a man, his features obscured but his presence unmistakable. I felt a mixture of fear and familiarity. Who was he? What did he want? "Help me," he mouthed, but no sound escaped. The words were etched into the air between us, heavy with desperation. In that moment, I realized this was the man from the photographs. He was trapped, lost between worlds. The shadows around him flickered, shifting like smoke, and I felt the weight of his plea pressing down on me. Could I save him? Would I be able to break the curse that bound him? I clutched the key tightly, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and resolve. The darkness had enveloped me, but I knew I had to confront it. As the shadows writhed around us, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The figure stood before me, an embodiment of despair wrapped in shadows. The cold air crackled with tension as I locked eyes with him, his gaze pleading and lost. I stepped closer, the ground beneath me uneven, my pulse echoing in my ears like a drum. "Can you hear me?" I called, my voice trembling as it sliced through the stillness. He nodded slowly, the movement almost imperceptible, as if it took all his energy just to acknowledge me. The air thickened around us, the darkness swirling like a living entity, watching us, waiting. I gripped the key in my palm, its cold metal pressing against my skin. "What happened to you?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. But instead of a response, he extended a hand, beckoning me to follow him into the depths of the circle. The shadows quivered at the edges, eager to draw me in, and for a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm me. Still, I took a step forward, trusting my instincts. "Wait," I hesitated, glancing around the clearing. "Is this safe?" He gestured again, and I could see the anguish in his eyes. There was something ancient here, a bond forged in the dark that transcended fear. I felt it pull me closer, a magnetic force that defied reason. With a shaky breath, I stepped into the center of the stone circle. The atmosphere shifted instantly. A low hum resonated through the air, vibrating against my bones. The stones pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the whispers growing louder, merging into a haunting melody that echoed from the past. It enveloped me, wrapping around my mind and heart, a symphony of longing and despair. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper against the cacophony of sound. The man's eyes widened, and I saw a flicker of hope spark within them, momentarily piercing the gloom. "Unlock the truth," he mouthed, though the words were lost in the wind. The shadows shifted, swirling closer, their movements becoming more frantic. I glanced around, sensing that the darkness was not just an observer but a participant in this unfolding drama. I lifted the key, the cold metal gleaming faintly in the dim light. My heart raced as I searched for a lock among the ancient stones. "Where do I use this?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. The man pointed towards one of the larger stones, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to glow faintly under the moonlight. I approached, my hands trembling as I traced the symbols with my fingertips. They felt warm, alive, as if they were waiting for the right touch. I found a small keyhole, almost hidden among the grooves. My breath hitched as I inserted the key, feeling the cool metal click into place. The moment I turned it, a surge of energy coursed through me. The air crackled, the whispers crescendoing into a frenzied chant. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing. The man looked at me with a mixture of fear and anticipation. With a sudden rush, the stone began to glow, illuminating the clearing in a brilliant light. The shadows recoiled, hissing softly as the light pushed them back. The ground trembled beneath me, and I felt a powerful force pulling at my very essence. The energy radiated outward, a wave that engulfed the entire circle. "Stay close," I shouted to the man, feeling the bond between us tighten. He stepped forward, and I could see the determination etched on his face. The light enveloped us both, casting long shadows that danced wildly around the circle. Suddenly, the air grew still. The chanting stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The light flickered and dimmed, revealing a vision within the stone circle. A scene unfolded before us, ethereal and haunting. I watched as figures, cloaked and hooded, gathered in a similar clearing, their voices rising in an ancient rite. "Is this a memory?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man nodded, his eyes wide with recognition. "They were here," I whispered, a chill running down my spine. "They performed rituals, they sacrificed." He nodded again, the weight of the past heavy upon us. I could see flashes of fear in his expression, the memories of what had transpired here echoing in his gaze. "They took something," he mouthed, desperation lacing his voice. "Something precious." The scene shifted abruptly, and I gasped as I saw the cloaked figures dragging a young woman toward the stones. She struggled, her face twisted in terror. My heart ached as I watched the ritual unfold. A sense of horror washed over me, and I understood they were not merely gathering, they were binding souls, ensnaring them in this cursed place. The vision faded, and I felt the shadows inch closer, hungry and alive. I turned back to the man, who was now nearly consumed by darkness. "What do we do?" I shouted over the mounting chaos. "Break the cycle," he urged, urgency filling his voice. "You must sever the bond they created." I understood then. The key was not just a means of unlocking the past, but a tool to sever the ties that bound the souls trapped here. My heart raced as I focused on the glowing stone, channeling all my energy into it. I remembered the woman's face, the terror etched in her features, and I couldn't let this darkness claim another victim. "Help me," I cried, reaching out to the man. He stepped closer, and I felt the connection between us strengthen, as if our combined wills could push back the shadows. Together, we placed our hands on the stone, the warmth radiating between us, merging our resolve. As we pressed down, the key began to vibrate, resonating with the ancient magic that pulsed beneath us. The light surged once more, brighter than before, illuminating the entire clearing. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the depths of the forest. "Now!" I shouted, channeling every ounce of strength I had. "Break the bond!" The key released a blinding flash, and the stone erupted in light. I felt a rush of energy, an overwhelming force surging through me. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms dissipating in the brightness. Then, a powerful shockwave hit, knocking us backward. The ground trembled violently, and I felt a ripping sensation as the energy surged forth, unraveling the darkness that had held its grip for so long. The vision of the ritual burned into my mind as I heard the echo of the woman's voice, one final, desperate cry for help. In that moment, the shadows exploded into a myriad of colors, bursting like fireworks against the night sky. I watched, breathless, as the figures faded into nothingness, their hold broken. The man stood beside me, his face illuminated by the soft glow emanating from the stone. We had done it. The curse was lifted, and the darkness that had haunted him for so long began to dissolve. But as the light faded, I felt a sense of emptiness. What had we released? What now lurked in the void we had created? I turned to the man, my heart pounding. "Are you free?" I asked, hope mingling with uncertainty. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a smile, a flicker of light in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with emotion. But as the shadows receded, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The weight of the darkness lingered in the air, a reminder that not all had been vanquished. I had set one soul free, but I could still sense the restless spirits that roamed the edges of the park, waiting for the chance to claim another. "Come," he urged, gesturing towards the path leading out of the stone circle. "We need to leave before they return." I nodded, the urgency of the moment propelling me forward. As we stepped out of the circle, the air felt lighter, but I knew the battle was far from over. We had disturbed something ancient and powerful, and the shadows were merely regrouping. Together, we made our way back through the trees, the remnants of the ritual still lingering in the air. I could hear the distant echoes of whispers, but they were quieter now, as if they were retreating into the depths of the night. As we reached the edge of the park, I looked back at the stone circle, now shrouded in darkness. I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. The veil had been lifted, but the shadows remained, waiting for the next opportunity to reclaim their power. "What will happen now?" I asked, glancing at him, searching for answers. He paused, his expression thoughtful. "We must be vigilant," he replied. "The darkness never truly vanishes. It changes, evolves, and waits. But we are stronger now. We can fight back." I nodded, determination surging within me. This was not the end, it was a new beginning. As we stepped into the night, I knew I was no longer alone in this battle against the shadows. Together, we would uncover the truth and confront whatever lay waiting in the abyss. The night air felt thick as we walked away from the stone circle, an eerie silence enveloping us. The path ahead wound through the trees, their branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers. Each step echoed in my mind, a reminder of the darkness we had just confronted. I could still feel the remnants of the energy we had unleashed tingling on my skin. Beside me, the man moved with a sense of urgency, his eyes scanning the shadows that flickered just beyond the edge of the path. I could sense his fear, a palpable thing that mixed with my own. "What happens now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What if they come back?" He paused, taking a deep breath. "We need to regroup. There are others who can help. They've been watching this place, waiting for signs." His tone was serious, filled with a knowledge that made me both anxious and curious. "We have to find them before the shadows regain their strength." "Who are they?" I pressed, my heart racing as I imagined what lay ahead. What do you mean by others? Those who know the history, he explained. Scholars, practitioners of the old ways. They understand the balance of light and dark. If we don't act quickly, more souls could be lost. We need to gather information about the cult and its rituals. This is far from over. As we continued down the winding path, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of the campus beyond. The familiar sight of the university buildings, bathed in the soft glow of lampposts, felt both comforting and surreal. It was hard to believe that just a short distance away, something so sinister lurked beneath the surface. Do you think anyone else knows what happened? I asked, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting shadows to materialize. What if they've already begun another ritual? He shook his head, determination etched on his face. We can't assume anything. We have to be cautious. The university has its secrets, and many will go to great lengths to protect them. We stepped into the main quad, where the ancient oak trees stood like guardians over the sprawling green. I noticed a few students milling about, their laughter ringing out like bells, oblivious to the darkness we had just faced. A chill crept up my spine at the thought of how close they were to danger. Where do we go from here? I asked, glancing at him. There's a library, an old archive in the basement of the history building. It houses documents and records from the founding of the university. If any information exists about the cult or its rituals, it will be there, he replied, urgency creeping into his voice. I nodded, adrenaline surging through me. Let's go. As we made our way across the campus, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows lengthened as if they were stretching out to reach us, whispering warnings that only I could hear. Every flickering light felt like a spotlight on our hurried movement, drawing attention to the secrets we carried. Once we reached the history building, the heavy wooden doors creaked as we pushed them open. The musty scent of old books enveloped us, a comforting but haunting aroma. Dim lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the shelves filled with dusty volumes and forgotten tales. Downstairs, he directed, leading me through narrow aisles lined with books that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. The silence was palpable, broken only by the soft thud of our footsteps on the worn wooden floor. We descended a narrow staircase that spiraled into darkness. My heart raced as we reached the basement. The air grew cooler, more oppressive. I could sense the weight of history pressing down around us. Here, he said, pointing to a heavy door at the end of the hall. The door was old and reinforced with iron bands, giving it a foreboding presence. This is where they keep the archives. As we pushed the door open, it groaned like a creature awakening from slumber. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with shelves stacked high with boxes and scrolls. The walls were lined with framed photographs of the university's early days, ghostly images of students and faculty that seemed to watch us with knowing eyes. Start searching, he instructed, moving to one of the shelves and beginning to sift through the papers. Look for anything about rituals, sacrifices, or the cult. I nodded and began rifling through the boxes. My fingers brushed over the spines of countless books, each one a potential key to the mystery we were unraveling. As I flipped through pages filled with faded ink, I felt a sense of urgency. The weight of the unknown pressed on my chest. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, sending a jolt of fear through me. I exchanged a glance with him, and we both froze, straining to hear. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. We need to hide, he whispered urgently, scanning the room for a place to conceal ourselves. My heart raced as I ducked behind a stack of boxes, my breath shallow and quiet. He slipped behind a nearby shelf, his expression tense. I could feel the air shift, charged with anticipation. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in the confined space. I peered out from my hiding place, my heart pounding like a drum. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, a professor, his face shadowed by the dim light. He held a lantern, the flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. "I know you're in here," he called, his voice low and menacing. I exchanged a worried glance with the man beside me. "What do we do?" I mouthed. "Stay quiet," he whispered back, his eyes fixed on the professor. The professor moved further into the room, scanning the shelves. My heart raced as I held my breath, willing myself to remain still. He paused, lifting the lantern to illuminate the shelves. "You cannot hide from the truth," he murmured, his voice echoing ominously. The tension in the air grew thick, and I could feel the shadows closing in around us, the darkness eager to consume whatever light remained. The professor's gaze swept over the room, and I could see the glint of something metallic at his side, a dagger, its blade catching the faint light. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice dripping with accusation. "You're meddling in things you cannot comprehend." I exchanged a frantic look with the man, and we both knew we had to act. As the professor stepped closer, I felt a surge of fear and determination. We couldn't let him find us here. With a swift motion, the man beside me slipped out from behind the shelf and lunged toward the professor. "We won't let you continue this madness," he shouted, his voice ringing out in defiance. The professor turned, surprise flickering across his face. But it was too late. The man tackled him, sending them both crashing to the floor. The lantern clattered away, rolling across the ground and extinguishing with a hiss. In the sudden darkness, I felt my heart racing as I scrambled to my feet. The sounds of struggle filled the room, a chaotic symphony of grunts and shouts. I could barely see, but I knew I had to help. "Get the dagger," I yelled, my voice breaking through the chaos. I could hear the clatter of fists against flesh, the heavy breathing of both men fighting for control. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I lunged forward, reaching into the darkness for the professor's arm. I felt the cold metal of the dagger against my fingertips, and I seized it, yanking it away just as he tried to grasp it. "Let him go!" I shouted, thrusting the dagger away from me. The professor struggled beneath the man, but I could see the fear in his eyes as he realized he was losing control. With a sudden burst of strength, the man pinned the professor's arms to the ground. "What are you hiding?" he demanded, his voice filled with a fierce intensity. In the dim light, I could see the professor's expression shift from anger to something darker, something that sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't know what you're asking for," he hissed, his eyes narrowing. "You are playing with forces beyond your understanding." "We're not afraid of you," I retorted, my voice stronger now. "We know what you're doing here. We know about the cult." The professor chuckled, a low, chilling sound that echoed in the darkness. "You think you can stop this? You are merely pawns in a much larger game." Just then, the door burst open, flooding the room with light. A group of students and faculty members rushed in, eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" one of them shouted. The professor seized the opportunity, wrenching himself free and scrambling to his feet. "You have no idea what you're involved in," he spat, glaring at us with fury. Before we could react, he bolted for the door, disappearing into the night. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. We had to stop him. "Quick, after him!" I yelled, but it was too late. The darkness swallowed him whole, leaving us standing amidst the chaos of the archive. As the students gathered around us, their faces filled with shock, I knew this battle was far from over. The threads of our lives had intertwined with forces that sought to control us, and now we were caught in a web of secrets and shadows that we could not escape. "We need to warn everyone," the man beside me said, determination hardening his features. "We must uncover the truth before it's too late." And as we stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the night's turmoil, I realized that the fight had only just begun. The darkness may have retreated for now, but it would return, and we would have to be ready to confront it head on. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing: we would not face it alone. Together, we would uncover the truth and challenge the shadows lurking in the depths of our reality. Have you ever felt like the ground beneath your feet was hiding something? That question hung in the air as I stood at the entrance of the dimly lit tunnel beneath the university. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and dread swelling within me. I glanced back at my friends, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of our flashlights, each expression reflecting a different shade of apprehension. This was no ordinary night. We were about to step into the depths of an underground labyrinth, a place whispered about in hushed tones among students. The campus was alive above us, yet down here, there was an unsettling silence. The damp air was thick with an earthy smell, almost suffocating. I shivered, not entirely from the cold. Shadows danced along the stone walls, and I could swear they were watching us, inching closer with every hesitant step we took. We had heard the stories, rumors of strange markings, signs of rituals performed long ago, and even of a student who had vanished without a trace while exploring these very tunnels. Each tale was more chilling than the last, but our curiosity outweighed our fear. I needed to know what lay ahead, even if it meant confronting the unknown. "Let's stick together," I urged, trying to sound braver than I felt. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on us, threatening to swallow us whole. As we moved deeper into the tunnel, I could hear the faint sound of dripping water, a rhythmic echo that seemed to taunt our presence. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking just beyond the reach of our flashlights. The flickering beams illuminated walls adorned with faded inscriptions, symbols that twisted and turned in ways I could barely comprehend. They felt ancient, alive, as if they were imbued with a power that could pull us into another realm. Suddenly, a chill swept through the air, sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the temperature, it was something more, something unsettling. I glanced at my friends. They were silent now, their faces pale and taut with fear. The air grew heavier, as if the tunnel itself was holding its breath. "Did you hear that?" one of my friends whispered, his voice trembling. I strained my ears, and in the silence, I detected it, a soft rustling sound, almost like whispering. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My heart pounded loudly in my chest, drowning out the sound of the dripping water. "It's probably just the wind," I said, trying to reassure myself as much as them. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they rang hollow. There was no wind down here. The further we ventured, the more disorienting the space became. Familiar pathways twisted into unfamiliar routes, the dim light casting ominous shadows that stretched and shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Every corner felt like an invitation to something sinister. Then we stumbled upon an open chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Our flashlights revealed crumbling stone pillars, standing like ancient sentinels. In the center lay a circular symbol etched into the ground, surrounded by more of those unsettling inscriptions. My pulse quickened. This was what we had come for, proof of the tales, the rituals, the darkness that lingered in these tunnels. "What do you think it is?" another friend asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I replied, stepping closer to the symbol. But it looks important. Just then, a strange odor wafted through the chamber, a sickly sweet scent that made my stomach churn. I wrinkled my nose, trying to pinpoint its source. The shadows around us seemed to thicken, swirling as if they had a life of their own. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My skin prickled with unease, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a pair of eyes lurking in the darkness. Let's not linger, I suggested, a sense of urgency creeping into my voice. We should keep moving. But before we could retreat, a sudden noise echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonant growl that reverberated off the walls. It felt primal, a warning from the depths below. Panic surged through me. We need to go, now! I shouted, my voice breaking the tension. We turned to flee, but as we rushed back toward the tunnel entrance, I could feel the darkness closing in, wrapping around us like a vice. My heart raced as the growl turned into a cacophony of whispers, an unsettling chorus that filled the air with dread. I stumbled, nearly falling as the shadows swirled, growing thicker and more tangible. Run! I urged again, my voice cracking. We barreled down the tunnel, the light from our flashlights bouncing wildly off the walls, illuminating grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out for us. In the chaos, I could hear my friends panting, their breath matching the frantic beat of my heart. I had to keep going, had to escape whatever haunted these tunnels. As we raced back toward the entrance, I could sense a presence behind us, something cold and insidious, stalking our every move. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices that echoed in my mind, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Finally, we burst through the entrance into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The campus was peaceful, unaware of the horrors we had just encountered. But as I glanced back at the tunnel, I felt an icy grip on my heart. Something had followed us out, something that belonged to the shadows. I could feel it lingering in the back of my mind, a reminder of the darkness we had just barely escaped. We were safe, for now. But I knew deep down that the mystery of the tunnels was far from over. The secrets they held were alive, and they would not rest until they claimed their due. The night felt different after our escape from the tunnels. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the campus, yet every shadow seemed to harbor secrets we had barely scratched the surface of. My heart still raced as we stumbled away from the entrance, breathless and shaken, the laughter of students in the distance feeling like a mockery of our harrowing experience. "Did you hear those voices?" one of my friends, Leo, asked, his eyes wide with fear. It felt like they were calling for us. I nodded, trying to shake the memory of the growls and whispers that haunted me. "We need to tell someone," I said, though a part of me hesitated. Who would believe us? Would they think we were just overreacting? As we walked back toward our dormitory, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a ghostly remnant of our night in the tunnels. Once we reached the safety of our room, we collapsed onto the floor, exhausted. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on us. I glanced around at my friends, Leo, Sarah, and Daniel, each of them looking equally traumatized. What if it wasn't just in our heads? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. What if we really disturbed something down there? The question hung in the air, heavy with dread. I could see the fear in their eyes reflecting my own turmoil. I pulled out my phone, hesitating before searching for anything about the university tunnels. The dim light illuminated the faces of my friends, and I could see the tension etched on their features. "Look at this," I said, finally finding a forum thread discussing the tunnels. "People have gone missing before. They talk about strange occurrences, shadows, and voices. It's not just us." As I read through the accounts, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Stories of students disappearing, whispers echoing through the tunnels, and an ancient cult that supposedly thrived in the shadows. The more I read, the more the lines between reality and horror blurred. "Maybe we should go back," Leo suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you out of your mind?" I shot back, the thought sending a wave of panic through me. We barely got alive. What if something's still down there? But as I spoke, I could see the glint of curiosity in their eyes, the thrill of the unknown beckoning them. It was as if the darkness of the tunnels had seeped into their minds, igniting a spark that was hard to extinguish. "I think we should go back," Sarah said, her tone resolute. "We need to find out what's really happening down there." A deep sense of foreboding settled in my stomach. Part of me wanted to resist, to forget the horrors we had witnessed. But another part, a darker, more curious part, was intrigued by the secrets that lay in the depths. That night, we made a pact. We would return to the tunnels, armed with more flashlights and courage to confront whatever lay beneath our feet. As I lay in bed, sleep eluding me, I could feel the echoes of the darkness calling to me, taunting me with the unknown. The next night, we gathered our supplies, extra batteries, rope, and a first aid kit. Each item felt like a fragile shield against the looming terror. As we stood at the entrance once more, a gust of wind howled through the tunnel, sending a chill down my spine. "I really don't like this," I muttered, my voice wavering. "Just remember, we're together," Leo reassured me, but even he didn't sound entirely convinced. As we stepped back into the oppressive darkness, the air felt thicker, heavier than before. The familiar dampness clung to our skin, and the silence was deafening. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, a reminder of the fear that threatened to consume me. We switched on our flashlights, the beams cutting through the blackness, illuminating the same stone walls that had felt so foreboding just a night before. The inscriptions loomed ominously, whispering secrets we couldn't understand. "Let's head to the chamber," I suggested, trying to sound brave. "Maybe we can figure out what those symbols mean." As we navigated through the winding paths, I couldn't shake the feeling that the tunnels were shifting, reshaping themselves as if they were alive. Each step deeper felt like a descent into madness. The familiar sounds of our footsteps began to fade, replaced by the soft, haunting echoes of distant whispers. "What's that?" Daniel suddenly asked, his voice barely a murmur. We paused, straining to listen. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks, but then I heard it, a low, rhythmic sound, almost like chanting, emanating from the depths. It was disorienting, a dark melody that sent chills racing down my spine. "Do you hear that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes," I breathed, my voice shaky. "It's coming from the chamber." We exchanged terrified glances, yet an irresistible pull urged us forward. We had come too far to turn back now. As we approached the chamber, the chanting grew louder, more insistent. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum heralding impending doom. I could feel the air thickening around us, heavy with anticipation. When we finally stepped into the chamber, the sight that met our eyes was surreal. The symbol we had seen before glowed faintly, pulsating with a life of its own. Shadows flitted around the walls, twisting and swirling as if they were alive. In the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured. My breath caught in my throat as it turned to face us, revealing nothing but an empty void where a face should be. "We should go," I shouted, but my voice sounded distant, drowned out by the haunting melody of the chanting. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, enveloping us in an inky blackness that snuffed out our flashlights. I felt a cold grip around my throat, a presence pushing against my very being. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, pulling my friends along as I sprinted back through the tunnel. The whispers followed us, relentless, echoing in my mind, blurring the lines of reality. I could feel the darkness clawing at my thoughts, threatening to drag me back into the depths. We raced toward the entrance, the walls closing in, shadows reaching out like fingers trying to pull us back. Just as I thought we would be consumed, we burst through the exit into the cool night air, gasping for breath. But even as we stumbled into the light, I could feel the remnants of the darkness lingering at the edge of my mind. The echoes of that chanting haunted me, and I knew we had awakened something we couldn't comprehend. The campus looked normal, but we were changed, marked by what we had seen. I glanced back at the entrance of the tunnels, dread settling in my gut. What had we unleashed, and what would it demand from us next? We stumbled out of the tunnels, gasping for air as the night wrapped around us like a comforting blanket. The campus was still, the sounds of distant laughter and footsteps fading into the background, but a chill had settled deep within me. I couldn't shake the image of that faceless figure, the whispering shadows that seemed to cling to my thoughts like a heavy fog. As we made our way back to our dormitory, I could feel the weight of our experience pressing down on us. The tunnel entrance loomed behind us, a gaping maw that promised more terror than we had yet encountered. I wanted to forget, to bury the memory of that chamber, but the images haunted me, replaying in my mind like a cursed film. "Did you see it?" Sarah broke the silence, her voice trembling. "That thing in the chamber?" It felt so alive. "I don't want to think about it," Leo replied, his voice shaky. "What was that chanting? What did we walk into?" We reached our dorm and collapsed onto the worn couches, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. I looked at each of my friends, their faces pale and drawn. We were no longer the carefree students we had been just days before. Something had shifted between us, a shared understanding of the darkness that lay beneath our feet. "I can't help but feel like we're being watched," Daniel said, running a hand through his hair. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that chamber." "I think we need to find out more about those symbols," I suggested, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. "If they're connected to whatever we saw, maybe understanding them could help us." Leo nodded slowly. "But where do we even start? Those symbols looked ancient." "I've heard rumors about the university library," Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. "They have archives with old texts. Maybe we can find something related to those rituals." As much as I wanted to avoid delving deeper, the urge to uncover the truth was intoxicating. We decided to meet early the next morning, fueled by the need to confront the shadows of our experience. The following day, we gathered at the library, a massive building that loomed over the campus like a fortress. The smell of aged paper filled the air, mingling with the scent of dust and history. As we navigated through the labyrinth of bookshelves, the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were aware of the secrets they held. We headed toward the archives, where old maps and manuscripts lay waiting. The dim lighting and quiet whispers of pages turning created an eerie ambience, echoing the feelings of dread we carried. I could feel my heart racing as we flipped through old tomes, searching for anything that might explain what we had encountered. Hours passed as we scoured the dusty volumes, but most of the texts were indecipherable. Just as we began to lose hope, Leo stumbled upon a withered book with a faded cover. It looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. "Guys, check this out," he called, his voice tinged with excitement. "It talks about the history of the tunnels." As he read aloud, the words sent shivers down my spine. The book detailed the construction of the tunnels, originally built as a means for students to navigate the campus during harsh winters. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. It spoke of rituals performed in the depths, ancient practices aimed at summoning forgotten deities. They believed the tunnels were a gateway, Leo continued, his voice barely above a whisper. A connection to something otherworldly. "What kind of rituals?" I asked, leaning in closer, my curiosity piqued despite the fear gnawing at me. "Sacrifices, offerings," Leo read. "It mentions a cult that thrived on the fear of the unknown, drawing power from the darkness that lingered in the tunnels." The room felt colder, the shadows creeping closer. I exchanged glances with Sarah and Daniel, their faces mirroring my growing concern. "What if we awakened something?" Daniel said, his voice cracking. "What if we are now part of this ritual?" "Stop it," I said, trying to shake off the feeling of impending doom. "We need to focus on understanding it. We can't let fear control us." As we continued to read, we discovered a passage that spoke of a specific symbol, one that mirrored the glowing emblem we had seen in the chamber. It was said to represent a binding, a connection to the souls trapped within the tunnels. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. "This is why those voices were calling to us," I murmured. "They were trying to lure us in, to complete something unfinished." Leo flipped to another page, revealing an illustration of the symbol surrounded by a circle of figures. "They conducted ceremonies to strengthen the bond, to keep the entities contained," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what if those ceremonies stopped?" A wave of nausea washed over me. What if they're free now? What if that's what we saw last night? Suddenly, a chilling realization gripped me. The chanting, the shadows, it wasn't just a random occurrence. We had become entangled in something far greater than we could comprehend. "We need to go back," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "If the rituals were disrupted, we might be able to stop whatever is trying to break through." "No," I protested, the idea sending ice through my veins. "We barely escaped last time. What if we don't get out again?" But deep down, I knew she was right. The truth beckoned us like a siren's song, a dangerous allure that demanded to be confronted. That evening, as twilight descended, we prepared ourselves for another descent into the depths. Each of us carried the weight of our previous experience, but a shared resolve ignited a flicker of courage within me. With flashlights in hand and fear clenching our hearts, we returned to the mouth of the tunnels, ready to face the shadows of our past. As we stepped into the darkness once more, I could feel the weight of history pressing down upon us, the echoes of those who had come before whispering warnings that we could not ignore. This time, we would confront the truth, no matter what horrors awaited us in the abyss. The air grew thick and heavy as we stepped back into the tunnels, a suffocating reminder of the fear that had gripped us before. Our flashlights flickered like fireflies in the oppressive darkness, casting long shadows that danced on the stone walls. Each step echoed around us, a haunting reminder that we were not alone in this ancient labyrinth. The passage felt more alive this time, as if the very walls were breathing, whispering secrets we could barely comprehend. I could hear the distant drip of water, a rhythmic reminder that time continued to flow, even in this place suspended between worlds. As we walked deeper, the temperature dropped, wrapping around us like icy fingers. "What if we find it again?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. What if it's waiting for us? I swallowed hard, trying to quell the rising tide of panic. We'll stick together, I assured her, though my own heart raced at the thought. We know what to expect now. But did we? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were venturing into the unknown, where the rules of our reality blurred. The symbols we had seen danced in my mind, each one a reminder of the rituals that had once echoed through these halls. As we reached the chamber, the air felt charged, electric. I shone my flashlight across the walls, illuminating the remnants of the strange markings we had seen before. They were clearer now, swirling patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. A shiver raced down my spine as I traced one with my fingers. It felt warm, as if it had been recently touched. Look! Leo pointed toward the center of the chamber, where the ground bore the distinct outline of something that had been recently disturbed. The stones were dark, wet, like a patch of fresh earth. It's like a circle. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. A binding circle, I murmured, recalling the passages we have read. It's where they would perform the rituals. Suddenly, a whisper rippled through the air, a low murmur that felt both familiar and foreign. I turned sharply, trying to locate the source, but all I could see were the shadows clinging to the edges of our light. Did you hear that? Daniel asked, his eyes wide with fear. What was that? Before I could answer, the air shifted, a sudden chill enveloping us. I could feel the energy in the room change, thickening like a storm cloud brewing overhead. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift, coalescing into forms that were just beyond my comprehension. We shouldn't be here, I said, my voice trembling as I stepped back. This is wrong. But Leo shook his head, determination etched on his face. We need to finish what we started. We can't let whatever is down here break free. As if in response to his words, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a tempest. I clutched my flashlight tighter, the beam flickering as if struggling against the encroaching darkness. Do you feel that? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. It's like something is watching us. I nodded, a cold dread settling in my stomach. It's like we're not alone. Suddenly, a figure darted across the chamber, a blur of darkness that sent a jolt of panic through me. I stumbled back, colliding with Daniel as we both gasped in shock. What was that? He shouted, eyes wide with fear. Stay together, I yelled, trying to steady my racing heart. The air felt charged with energy, a pulsing force that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Leo, we need to leave, Sarah pleaded, her voice rising above the whispers. This isn't right. But Leo's gaze was fixed on the center of the circle, where a faint glow began to emanate from the symbols. I need to see what it is, he said, stepping forward despite our protests. Wait. I reached out, but it was too late. As Leo crossed the threshold of the circle, a surge of energy rippled through the air, and the whispers erupted into a deafening cacophony. The chamber shook as if the very foundations of the earth were quaking beneath us. The glow intensified, illuminating the walls in a blinding light that cut through the darkness. I shielded my eyes, the sound of chanting rising to a frenzied pitch. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming shapes that lurked just at the edges of my vision. Leo! Get back! I shouted, panic gripping my chest as I watched him stand at the center of the circle, seemingly entranced by the light. The shadows thickened, coalescing into a grotesque form that towered above us, its features indistinguishable but exuding an overwhelming sense of malevolence. A pair of eyes appeared, dark and hollow, fixed upon Leo with an intensity that made my blood run cold. Run! I screamed, grabbing Sarah's hand and pulling her toward the exit. Daniel followed closely behind, our breaths coming in ragged gasps as we fled the chamber, the chaotic whispers echoing in our ears. We raced through the tunnels, the darkness closing in around us as we navigated the familiar path. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out the sound of our footsteps and the haunting whispers that pursued us. The air felt alive with a suffocating energy, as if the very walls were closing in. Just as we reached the entrance, I glanced back, my heart sinking at the sight of the shadows spilling from the chamber, chasing after us like a living nightmare. "Keep going," I urged, shoving Sarah forward. We burst into the cool night air, collapsing onto the grass outside the tunnel entrance, gasping for breath. The moon hung high above us, casting an ethereal glow on the campus, but I knew the nightmare wasn't over. "Where's Leo?" Daniel panted, looking around in panic. My heart sank. He didn't follow us. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We had left him behind, trapped in a world of darkness, bound by the very forces we had sought to confront. "We have to go back," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "But it's too dangerous," I protested, fear clawing at my insides. "What if we can't save him?" "If we don't go back, he's lost," she replied, her determination igniting a flicker of hope within me. I took a deep breath, looking at my friends. We were in this together, bound by a shared fate. "Okay," I said, my voice steadying. "We go back. But this time, we stick together. We find him and we leave, no matter what." As we stood on the threshold of the tunnel, the shadows loomed behind us, a reminder of the darkness we were about to confront. This time, we wouldn't just seek the truth. We would fight for our friend and for our own survival. The descent into darkness awaited us once more, and we were ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The chill of the night air wrapped around us like a shroud as we stood at the mouth of the tunnel, our breaths mingling with the lingering fear that hung thick in the darkness. The memories of our last descent flooded my mind, Leo standing at the center of that cursed circle, the shadows looming above us like a dark omen. I took a deep breath, trying to summon every ounce of courage I could muster. "We can't waste time," Sarah said, her voice steady, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. "He's counting on us." I nodded, steeling myself for the unknown. "Stay close," I instructed, my heart racing as we stepped back into the yawning darkness. The light from our flashlights flickered weakly, revealing the damp stone walls that seemed to close in around us. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the tunnel itself was aware of our presence, whispering secrets of ancient rituals and forgotten horrors. As we ventured deeper, the familiar passage twisted into a maze of shadows and echoes. Each footfall felt louder than the last, an unwanted reminder of our vulnerability. The dampness seeped into my clothes, chilling my skin, but it was the atmosphere that truly unsettled me. It felt alive, pulsing with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "I remember this," Daniel said suddenly, his voice breaking the heavy silence. We turned left at that fork. I glanced at him, grateful for the familiar touchstone in this disorienting place. "Let's hope it leads us back to the chamber." The further we went, the more the shadows seemed to stretch and contort, as if they were alive, lurking just beyond the reach of our flashlights. Whispers curled through the air, chilling me to the bone. I strained to catch a word, a name, anything that might hint at what awaited us deeper within the tunnels. "Do you think it's really a cult?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're still down here, waiting?" I tried to dismiss the thought, but my mind raced with the implications. We need to focus on finding Leo. The rest can wait. The path narrowed as we approached the chamber, the weight of dread pressing down on us. I shone my flashlight ahead, illuminating the area just before we entered. The circle was still there, marked on the ground, the symbols glowing faintly as if still charged with the energy of our previous encounter. Stay alert, I warned, my voice tense as I scanned the area for any sign of Leo. The chamber felt different this time, charged with a malevolent presence, the air crackling as if alive with anticipation. Leo! I called out, my voice echoing against the cold stone walls. Where are you? No response came, just the echo of my own words fading into silence. My heart pounded as I stepped further into the chamber, the shadows dancing at the edges of our light. Maybe he's in the back, Daniel suggested, moving cautiously toward the far side of the chamber. We should check there. As we moved deeper, the atmosphere thickened, and the whispers grew louder, rising to a fever pitch. I felt a creeping unease settle in my stomach as I turned back toward the circle, the glow of the symbols illuminating the grotesque outlines of the walls. Suddenly, a figure stumbled into the light. Leo! Relief surged through me, but it was quickly tempered by the sight of him. He appeared disheveled, eyes wide with terror, his clothes torn and dirted. Leo! I shouted, rushing toward him. Are you okay? He backed away, shaking his head as if he couldn't comprehend what was happening. No! Don't come any closer, he yelled, panic lacing his voice. It's not safe. I halted in my tracks, confusion washing over me. What do you mean? We came to get you. We need to leave. But before he could respond, the ground beneath us began to tremble, the symbols on the floor pulsating with an eerie light. Shadows surged around us, coalescing into a dark mass that writhed and twisted, a monstrous entity born from the very fears we had tried to confront. Run! Leo shouted, his eyes wild with fear as he turned to flee. But the shadows moved with a life of their own, reaching out with tendrils of darkness that snaked toward us. Get back! I yelled, my heart racing as I grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her close. We need to get out now. We raced toward the exit, the oppressive darkness clawing at our heels. The whispers morphed into screams, echoing in our minds as we fought to escape the nightmare that had come to life around us. The shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, their outlines shifting and blurring as they reached for us. Keep moving, Daniel urged, panic evident in his voice as we barreled down the tunnel. The cold air pressed against us like an unseen weight, and I could hear the frantic beating of my heart drowning out everything else. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, our footsteps echoing in the narrow passage as we ran for our lives. I glanced back, the shadows in pursuit, hungry and relentless. It felt as if they were feeding off our fear, gaining strength with every terrified breath. Finally, we reached the entrance, and I felt a surge of hope. But as we burst into the cool night air, I turned to look back one last time. The shadows writhed at the tunnel's mouth, swirling like a storm, but they did not follow us out. Is it over? Sarah gasped, her face pale as she collapsed onto the grass. The moon hung overhead, casting an eerie light that illuminated our surroundings. I think so, I replied, but uncertainty gnawed at me. I felt a lingering presence, a weight that pressed upon my chest, as if the darkness had left a part of itself with us. Leo stood apart, trembling as he leaned against a tree. I saw things, he whispered, his voice shaky. They were calling to me. What do you mean? I asked, stepping closer. What did you see? He shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. I can't explain it. It was like they wanted me to join them. They showed me things, rituals, sacrifices. It was so real. A shiver ran down my spine at his words. "You're safe now," I reassured him, but I wasn't sure if I believed it. "We're all safe." But even as I said the words, I knew they rang hollow. The night air felt heavy with the weight of our experience, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were merely waiting, biding their time until we were vulnerable once more. As we gathered together, the reality of what we had faced sank in. We had survived, but at what cost? The echoes of the tunnel lingered in my mind, a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. The night was quiet, but I could sense that it was only a temporary reprieve. "Let's get out of here," I finally said, my voice steady despite the tremors of fear that still coursed through me. We turned away from the entrance, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The mysteries of the tunnel would haunt us, a dark legacy etched into our memories. As we walked away, I stole one last glance at the tunnel entrance. The shadows had receded, but I knew they were still there, waiting in the depths of the earth, holding their secrets close. The night was far from over. Have you ever seen a hat that vanished into thin air? It was a question that haunted the townsfolk near the forest in Wisconsin. They spoke of it in hushed tones, often exchanging nervous glances, as if the very mention of the hat would summon its eerie presence. The stories flowed like the whispers of the wind, each retelling adding a layer of fear. Some claimed it belonged to a hunter who had entered the woods long ago, never to return. Others insisted it was a warning, a sign of things better left unexplored. In the small town, I felt the weight of the legend as I walked along the edge of the woods. I was a newcomer, drawn here by the stories and the chill of the unknown. My name is Alex, and curiosity has always been my companion, often leading me down paths best left alone. I had heard the whispers of the hat, and like so many before me, I found myself captivated by its mystery. The forest loomed before me, its trees standing tall and silent, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Everything appeared deceptively peaceful. But beneath the surface, an unsettling feeling tugged at my gut. The air was thick with a strange scent, something earthy yet sweet, like decaying leaves mixed with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. As I ventured deeper into the underbrush, I heard it. A soft rustling, almost like a whisper, weaving through the trees. I paused, my heart racing. Was it the wind, or was something watching me? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to continue, but the feeling of being observed lingered, wrapping around me like a cold shroud. I spotted a clearing up ahead, the trees parting to reveal a patch of soft grass. My pulse quickened. This was where they said the hat had been seen most often. I stepped into the clearing, scanning the ground for any sign of it. But what I found was unsettling. In the center lay an old, withered hat, its once vibrant color faded to a dull gray. I approached cautiously, my curiosity battling against the rising dread. As I reached out to touch it, the air around me seemed to shift. A chill ran down my spine, and in that instant, the hat vanished. One moment it was there, and the next, it was gone, leaving only a whisper of wind in its wake. "Did you see that?" I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence answered me, heavy and foreboding. Panic surged through me. Had I imagined it? Was this what they meant when they spoke of the hat? Suddenly, I heard a low growl echoing from the trees, deep and resonant. My heart dropped. I turned to flee, but the once familiar path now twisted and turned, a labyrinth of shadows. The whispers grew louder, coiling around me, wrapping me in a web of uncertainty and fear. Keep moving, I urged myself, my feet pounding against the ground. The growl followed me, echoing through the trees, a sinister reminder of the unseen predator lurking just out of sight. I sprinted, branches clawing at my skin, the world around me dissolving into a blur of color and sound. Then I stumbled into another clearing, breathless and panicked. The air felt thicker here, almost suffocating. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see whatever pursued me. Instead, I was met with an unsettling stillness. The growl had faded, but the whispers remained, now swirling in my mind. Turn back, they seemed to say. Leave this place. But I couldn't. My curiosity held me captive, drawing me deeper into the woods, away from reason and safety. I pressed forward, each step becoming a battle against the rising tide of dread. The trees closed in around me, their gnarled roots wrapping around my ankles as if trying to keep me from escaping. With every turn, the landscape felt more alien. Familiar paths morphed into dark tunnels, and the shadows grew heavier. I felt a presence, a weight in the air that seemed to pulse with energy, like a heartbeat. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I turned, my breath hitching in my throat. There, standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight, was a figure. It was cloaked in darkness, the details blurred and undefined. My heart raced as I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to run. But I was frozen, entranced by the unknown. "Why do you follow?" a voice rumbled, low and haunting. It echoed in my mind, a question that sent shivers down my spine. I just wanted to know," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "About the hat, the stories." The figure shifted, revealing a glimpse of something beneath the cloak, something elongated and twisted. Fear ignited within me, shattering the paralysis. I turned and ran, branches snapping underfoot as I fled, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. Behind me, the growl returned, louder and more feral, mingling with the whispers that now filled the air like a cacophony of despair. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The darkness was alive, and it was hungry. I broke through the tree line, bursting into the open air. The world outside felt different, somehow more vibrant, yet the terror still clung to me. I stumbled away from the woods, my heart racing, but I knew the fear would not easily fade. I had survived the encounter, but the experience etched itself into my mind. The whispers followed me, a reminder of the unknown that lurked just beyond the veil of safety. As I looked back at the forest, I realized the hat was only the beginning. The true danger lay in the depths of the woods, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. And somewhere in the darkness, I could still hear the growl, a warning that resonated through the trees, echoing in my thoughts. "Beware what vanishes, for it may never let you return." I stumbled away from the forest, my heart racing like a trapped bird. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that twisted and curled across the ground. With every step, I could feel the chill of the woods behind me, as if it were reaching out, trying to pull me back into its dark embrace. The whispers lingered in my mind, echoing the voice of the figure I had encountered. "Why do you follow?" it had asked. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a question I would need to answer. The town lay ahead, its familiar shapes and sounds a welcome sight. The warmth of the streetlights flickered into life as I approached, casting a golden glow over the cracked pavement. I could hear the distant laughter of children playing, the comforting hum of evening conversations. But I felt like an outsider, a ghost drifting through a world that seemed oblivious to the terror I had just faced. I turned a corner, the cafe where I had spent countless afternoons, coming into view. It was bustling with students, their laughter mixing with the clinking of cups and the smell of fresh coffee. I hesitated at the door, unsure if I wanted to share what I had experienced. The weight of the forest still pressed against my chest, a heavy reminder of the danger that lay just beyond the light. "Hey, Alex." "Over here," called out a familiar voice. It was Jenna, a friend from my class, waving energetically from a table near the window. I forced a smile and joined her, trying to push aside the dread that still clung to me. "Everything okay?" "You look a little shaken," she said, her brow furrowing with concern. "Yeah, just had a weird day," I replied, avoiding her gaze. The last thing I wanted was to unleash the horror of the hat and the figure in the woods onto her. Instead, I shifted the conversation to lighter topics, but my mind kept drifting back to the forest, to the shadows that had threatened to consume me. As we chatted, I couldn't help but glance at the door, half expecting to see the figure standing there, cloaked in darkness. The more I tried to push the thought away, the more persistent it became. Eventually, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, stark and unyielding. I splashed cold water on my face, staring into the mirror. The reflection looked back at me, eyes wide and haunted. "You're okay," I muttered under my breath. But the memory of the growl, the figure, and the whispers refused to fade. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. I turned back, but the restroom was empty. My heart raced. I shook my head, willing myself to calm down. "It's just the adrenaline," I thought. Just the adrenaline. When I returned to the cafe, Jenna was deep in conversation with a couple of other friends. I slid into the booth, forcing a smile as they chatted animatedly about weekend plans. But as I listened, I felt a growing unease. The laughter around me felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. Then, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing me to shiver involuntarily. I glanced toward the entrance again, expecting to see a dark silhouette. Nothing. Just the streetlights illuminating the empty sidewalk outside. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself in the moment. "Hey, do you guys ever hear those stories about the forest?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Jenna raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one about the hat?" "Yeah, we all know that one. Super creepy. Have you ever seen it?" I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. "Not exactly. I just heard some things. It's kind of unsettling." "Oh, come on. You can't believe all those old tales," one of the other friends laughed. "It's just a hat." "Yeah, but what if it's more than that?" I pressed, my heart pounding as I shared the details of my encounter. "I saw it, and then it just vanished. There was this figure." "Whoa, chill." Jenna interrupted, her laughter fading. "You're not serious, are you? You didn't actually see something in the woods, did you?" I could see the skepticism on their faces, but I pressed on, the need to share my experience overwhelming. "I swear, it was real. The growling, the whispers, it felt alive." The room fell silent, and I could feel their eyes on me, searching for the punchline. But all I saw were the shadows creeping in around the edges of their expressions. I realized too late that sharing my story was only going to invite ridicule. Okay, maybe it sounds a little crazy," I conceded, forcing a laugh. but you have to admit, it's kind of freaky. The conversation shifted back to lighter topics, but the laughter felt hollow to me. I excused myself once more, needing fresh air to clear my mind. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the turmoil inside me. I walked towards the edge of town, the familiar path leading back toward the woods. I could feel the pull of the forest again, a magnetic force drawing me closer. I hesitated, glancing back at the warm lights of the cafe, the laughter fading into the distance. But the need for answers burned in my chest. The trees loomed ahead, their shadows stretching towards me like fingers beckoning me closer. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. What if I could find the hat again? What if I could understand the whispers? My curiosity was a double-edged sword, but it was a compulsion I couldn't resist. With each step, the night grew darker, the sounds of the town fading behind me. The forest loomed like a gaping mouth ready to swallow me whole. I stepped into the shadows, the air thick with an energy that made my skin prickle. Just one more look, I whispered to myself, though a voice in my head warned me that I was treading on dangerous ground. The path twisted beneath my feet, leading me deeper into the heart of the woods. The whispers returned, softer this time, almost melodic. Follow us, they seemed to call, luring me deeper. I pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable force. The trees closed in around me, the darkness deepening. I felt the weight of the night settle around me, and the forest was no longer just a backdrop, it was alive. As I walked, the feeling of being watched returned, more intense than before. Suddenly, I stopped. Ahead, in the faint light of my phone, I could see the clearing where I had first encountered the hat. My breath quickened, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through me. What awaited me in that clearing? I didn't know, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to face the shadows that lurked in the depths of the woods. I had to uncover the truth behind the whispers and the vanishing hat, even if it meant confronting the very thing that haunted my nightmares. As I stepped into the clearing, the world around me fell silent. The trees stood like sentinels, watching. And there, in the center, I saw it again, the old, withered hat, resting on the ground. This time, I would not let it disappear. I would uncover its secrets, no matter the cost. The clearing was a still, eerie place, bathed in an unnatural twilight that seemed to defy the encroaching night. The air hung thick with a tension I could almost taste. As I stepped closer to the hat, my heart pounded against my ribcage like a drum, each beat echoing the doubts swirling in my mind. What am I doing here? I thought, a part of me screaming to turn back. The hat lay flat on the ground, its once vibrant color faded to a dull brown, covered in a thin layer of dirt and moss. It looked as if it had been placed there intentionally, as if waiting for me. My hands trembled as I reached down, fingers brushing against the frayed edges. It was surprisingly cool to the touch, sending a shiver up my spine. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush made me freeze. My breath caught in my throat. Was I truly alone? I turned, scanning the trees that surrounded me. The shadows danced as if alive, swirling around the trunks and weaving in and out of sight. Just the wind, I whispered to myself, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. The whispers were back, swirling around my head, barely audible but persistent. Come closer. Take it. You know you want to. With a surge of defiance, I grasped the hat firmly, pulling it up from the ground. As I did, a chill swept through the clearing, colder than the night air. The whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of voices, each one distinct, but all resonating with an urgent plea. Don't leave. Don't let it go. What do you want from me? I shouted, my voice breaking the spell of silence that had engulfed the woods. The sound reverberated off the trees, a stark contrast to the quiet that had surrounded me. For a moment, I felt powerful, defiant against the unseen forces at play. But as I stood there, holding the hat, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and I could feel eyes upon me, countless eyes lurking in the shadows. A tremor ran through my hands, and the hat slipped slightly, almost as if it were trying to escape my grasp. I took a step back, but the forest felt like it was closing in, the branches of the trees curling around me like fingers. The path I had taken to enter this clearing felt far away, as if the woods had shifted while I was distracted. Panic surged within me. I need to get out of here, I thought, but the thought seemed to dissolve in the faces of the shadows that surrounded me. And then I saw it, a figure emerging from the trees, stepping into the dim light of the clearing. My heart raced. It was tall and cloaked, the fabric swirling around its form like smoke. The face was obscured, hidden beneath a deep hood, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me, a weight that seemed to bear down on my very soul. "Why have you come?" the figure asked, its voice echoing like the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was low and resonant, chilling me to the bone. I held the hat tighter, the fabric now damp against my palm. I wanted to know the truth, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. About the hat, about what happened here. The figure took a step closer, and I could see the glint of something in its hand, an object shimmering faintly, pulsing with an otherworldly light. "The truth comes at a price," it said, the words wrapping around me like chains. "What will you sacrifice to uncover it?" A rush of fear coursed through me. Sacrifice? I echoed, my thoughts racing. I just wanted answers. The figure tilted its head, the shadows shifting around it. Answers come with consequences. This hat is a vessel, a memory of those who once roamed these woods. But it is also a trap, a lure for the curious. Many have sought it, and many have never returned. My mind reeled. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What happened to them?" "Lost to the darkness," it replied, the voice deepening, resonating with a sorrowful finality. "They followed the whispers, like you. And now they remain here, bound to this place, their desires unfulfilled. Their souls linger, echoing through the trees." I felt the weight of despair pressing down on me. The stories I had heard, the warnings whispered among the students, all of it suddenly felt tangible and terrifying. The voices of the lost echoed in my mind, pleading for release. "I don't want to be one of them," I shouted, taking a step back. "Then you must decide," the figure said, raising the shimmering object, revealing it to be a small pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "Embrace the truth and join them, or turn away, but know that the darkness will always seek you out. Once touched, it never truly leaves." I hesitated, my heart racing. What choice did I have? The thought of becoming another lost soul sent a wave of nausea through me. But the pull of the hat, the whispers that had lured me here, was powerful. Could I really just leave it behind? "Choose wisely," the figure urged, its voice like the rustle of leaves in a storm. "This moment is fleeting, but its repercussions are eternal." I glanced at the hat, then at the pendant, both symbols of the unknown. Fear gripped my throat, but I could not ignore the truth that resonated within me. I had come seeking answers, and now, standing at the crossroads of fate, I had to decide whether to confront the darkness or flee from it. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, urging me forward, but I steeled my resolve. No more running, I whispered to myself. With a surge of determination, I took a step toward the figure. I want to understand. I will face the truth, I declared, my voice steady. The shadows seemed to retreat slightly, as if acknowledging my choice. The figure nodded, and for a brief moment, the air shimmered with an unearthly light. Then prepare yourself, it said. The truth is rarely what we expect. You will need courage to face what lies ahead. As the darkness closed in around me, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The weight of uncertainty was still there, but I was ready to confront it. I held the hat tightly in one hand, and the choice I had made began to echo in my mind, intertwining with the whispers of the past. Let the journey begin, I murmured, stepping forward into the unknown, my heart racing as I prepared to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows. The shadows swirled around me as I stepped closer to the figure. The air was electric, crackling with a tension that vibrated in my bones. The whispers faded, replaced by an almost palpable silence that enveloped us. I could feel the weight of countless unseen eyes upon me, watching, waiting. Are you prepared for what lies ahead? The figure asked, its voice echoing through the stillness, as if it originated from the very ground beneath my feet. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. What would I uncover? What truths awaited me in the darkened corners of this forest? The figure extended its hand, and I noticed the pendant glowing softly. It seemed to pulse in rhythm with my racing heart. Take this, it said, and you will see. But remember, knowledge carries a burden. I reached out, fingers trembling as I grasped the pendant. It felt warm against my skin, a stark contrast to the chill in the air. As I held it, a vision flashed before my eyes, a glimpse of the past. I saw the woods alive with light, laughter echoing through the trees, and a group of people gathered around a fire. Their faces were full of joy, but then darkness swept in, casting a shadow over their celebration. The vision faded, leaving me breathless. What was that? I gasped, trying to process the images. The echoes of those who came before you, the figure replied. They sought the truth, just as you do. But the woods have a way of consuming those who are not prepared. I felt a chill creep down my spine. What happened to them? I asked, dread settling in my stomach. They were lost in the depths of their desires, it said, drawn to the secrets hidden within these woods. They paid the price for their curiosity. But now you stand at a crossroads, and you must decide your fate. As the figure spoke, the pendant began to vibrate, and a soft light emanated from it, illuminating the clearing. Shadows flickered and danced around us, morphing into shapes that whispered stories long forgotten. I glanced at the hat in my other hand. It felt heavier now, as if burdened by the weight of its own history. Follow me, the figure instructed, turning away from the clearing and moving deeper into the woods. I hesitated for a moment, the instinct to flee clawing at my mind, but I forced myself to step forward. Each footfall felt like a defiance against the fear that threatened to engulf me. The path twisted and turned, the trees closing in around us. Their gnarled branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and the ground beneath me was uneven, littered with roots and fallen leaves. The air grew thicker, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something sweet yet rotten, like decay lingering just beneath the surface. Do you feel it? The figure asked, glancing back at me, its hood obscuring its face. The pull of the unknown? It is intoxicating, is it not? Yes, I admitted, a thrill running through me. But it's also terrifying. The figure nodded, and as we walked, it began to share the stories of those who had come before. They were seekers, much like you, driven by curiosity, ambition, and sometimes desperation. But the deeper they ventured, the more the forest revealed its true nature. The whispers became screams, and the light became shadows. With each word, the atmosphere thickened, the trees seeming to loom larger, closing in on us. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the clearing we had just left, but all I saw were darkened trunks and twisting branches. What happened to them? I pressed, my voice trembling slightly. Did they all disappear? Yes, the figure replied, its voice low and somber. Some became part of the forest, their spirits trapped among the whispers. Others simply vanished, swallowed by the darkness, leaving nothing but echoes of their existence. But there is still a way to break the cycle. My heart raced. How? How can I save them? The truth must be faced. You must confront the heart of the forest, it said, gesturing ahead. But be warned, it is not a place for the faint-hearted. There are creatures that dwell there, remnants of those who have lost their way, twisted by their own desires. You must be ready to face them. I nodded, my determination solidifying. I had come this far, there was no turning back. As we ventured deeper, the path grew narrower, the trees more twisted and foreboding. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could hear the faint sound of rustling, as if something was moving just beyond the reach of the light from the pendant. Suddenly, the figure stopped, raising a hand. Listen, it commanded. I strained my ears, hearing a faint melody weaving through the air, a haunting, beautiful sound that seemed to beckon me forward. It was enchanting, drawing me in with a pull that felt almost magnetic. What is that? I whispered, captivated by the sound. It is the siren call of the forest, the figure warned, its tone urgent. Do not be deceived. It is a lure, a trap for the unwary. Do not follow it, or you may become one of them. As the melody swelled, the shadows shifted, swirling around us. I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, the whispers intensifying once more. My heart raced, torn between the desire to listen and the fear of what lay ahead. Stay focused, the figure urged. The truth is just ahead. You must resist the pull. I clenched the pendant tightly in my hand, grounding myself in the moment. I had to remember why I was here, to uncover the truth and, perhaps, to save those lost in the shadows. With each step, I pushed past the alluring melody, forcing myself to concentrate on the path ahead. Finally, we reached a clearing bathed in a sickly green light. At its center stood a gnarled tree, ancient and twisted, its bark peeling away to reveal dark, glistening veins beneath. This was the heart of the forest, pulsating with a life of its own. The truth lies within, the figure said, stepping aside. It is time to confront your fate. I took a deep breath, stepping forward as the air around me crackled with energy. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, echoing the doubts and fears that had haunted me since my arrival. Face it, they cried, their voices merging into a terrifying chorus. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and I felt the weight of the forest's history pressing down on me. I raised the pendant, its light illuminating the darkened tree. What secrets did it hold? What sacrifices had been made? With a surge of courage, I placed my hand on the tree's rough bark, feeling its pulse beneath my fingertips. The moment I touched it, visions flooded my mind, screams, laughter, desperate cries for help, and the relentless pull of the darkness that lay hidden in the depths. Show me, I demanded, my voice cutting through the chaos, desperate for answers. Show me the truth. As the visions intensified, I felt the forest respond, the whispers coalescing into a single voice that echoed through my mind. Welcome, Seeker. Are you ready to pay the price? In that moment, I understood the journey had only just begun, and the darkness was waiting, eager to reveal its secrets. The air around me thickened, heavy with anticipation. As I pressed my palm against the gnarled bark, I felt the vibrations of the forest pulse through me, a chaotic symphony of voices whispering secrets long buried. What price? I asked, my heart racing, uncertainty clenching in my insides. The voice that responded was both deep and melodic, resonating from the tree as if it were alive, sentient. The price is the essence of your truth. You must confront your deepest fears and desires, for only then will you see clearly. With that proclamation, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble, and the world around me shifted. The clearing faded away, replaced by a dark void that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. I gasped, feeling as though I was being pulled into a realm where reality and nightmare intertwined. Suddenly, scenes erupted around me, vivid images that flared to life like lightning. I saw the faces of those who had vanished into the forest, their expressions a blend of terror and longing. They stood at the edge of the shadows, their eyes pleading as if they could see me but were trapped in a realm I could not reach. Help us, one figure cried, stretching out a hand toward me. We were just like you, searching for answers. But now, we are lost. Panic surged within me. What happened to you? I shouted, trying to penetrate the veil of despair that surrounded them. How can I save you? Embrace the darkness, another voice echoed, softer yet haunting. Only by understanding it can you break free. The images flickered, revealing fleeting glimpses of their pasts, a celebration, a ritual, laughter echoing through the trees, only to be shattered by an unseen force that drove them into the depths. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The forest had consumed them, twisting their desires into something malevolent. But why? What had they sought that had led to their doom? Face your truth, Seeker, the voice from the tree urged. What do you desire most? What will you sacrifice? The void around me pulsed with energy, and I was struck by an overwhelming wave of emotions, fear, regret, longing. Memories rushed forth unbidden, the moments of doubt and insecurity, the relentless pursuit of acceptance and understanding. I had always felt like an outsider, grappling with a deep-seated need to prove myself, to find a place where I truly belonged. I want to belong. I shouted into the abyss, my voice ringing with desperation. I want to be seen. I want to understand. At that declaration, the scene shifted again. I was back in the clearing, but it felt different. The tree loomed larger, its branches twisting overhead, casting strange shadows that danced on the ground. The air was charged with a palpable energy, and I could feel the whispers growing louder, almost frenzied. Then confronted, the voice commanded, "Embrace your fears. Embrace your desires." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm not afraid," I shouted, even as doubt threatened to creep in. "I'll face whatever is here." The shadows swirled around me, morphing into nightmarish forms that reflected my deepest insecurities, visions of failure, of rejection, of being lost and alone. They loomed larger, pressing in on all sides, their whispers sharp and cruel. "You will never belong," one figure hissed, its eyes glinting with malice. "You will always be an outsider." "Stop it," I yelled, forcing myself to stand tall. "You don't define me." The moment I asserted my strength, the shadows recoiled, as if stung. A surge of warmth spread through me, igniting a flicker of hope. I had always been the master of my own path, and no dark whisper could change that. But just as the shadows withdrew, a new vision emerged, this one far more powerful, a flicker of light in the darkness, a memory of laughter shared with friends, of moments where I felt seen and accepted. I could almost hear their voices calling out to me, urging me forward. Choose to remember, the voice from the tree resonated. Let the light guide you through the dark. Fueled by determination, I reached deep within myself, summoning every ounce of courage. I choose to remember the love and support I've had. I choose to embrace who I am, flaws and all. As I spoke those words, the shadows began to dissolve, breaking apart like smoke in the wind. I felt the warmth of the pendant in my hand grow hotter, illuminating the clearing with a radiant light. The whispers transformed into a harmonious melody, lifting the weight from my chest. The gnarled tree trembled, and the air shimmered as if reality itself was bending. You have faced your fears and claimed your truth, the voice proclaimed. You may now pass. The clearing expanded, revealing a path lined with luminescent flowers that glowed with an ethereal light. I glanced back at the trapped spirits, who now appeared less tormented, their eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, they called, their voices weaving together in a chorus of hope. You've given us strength. I turned toward the path, heart racing with a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. I stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, determined to uncover the final truths of the forest and discover my place within its mysteries. As I walked, the shadows receded and the light grew brighter. Each step felt like a step toward liberation, and I could feel the presence of the forest shifting, no longer a predator but a guide. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to unravel the last threads of the enigma that bound this place. But even as I moved forward, a nagging doubt lingered at the back of my mind. What other truths awaited me in the heart of the forest? Would I be ready for the final revelation? The answers beckoned, and I was determined to find them, no matter the cost. Have you ever felt like the walls are watching you? The question hung in the stale air of the Washington subway station, igniting a sense of unease that wrapped around me like a thick fog. I leaned against the cold, damp wall, my mind racing with thoughts that clawed at my sanity. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast eerie shadows, distorting the familiar platform into something strange and menacing. My name is Ethan, and I had always found solace in the rhythms of the city, the pulse of the subway, the hum of voices, the comforting routine of my daily commute. But recently, something had shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with a strange energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I wasn't alone in this feeling. Whispers circulated among my friends about the strange graffiti that had begun to appear on the station walls. At first, it was just a few crude sketches, abstract shapes and lines that looked like they had been made in haste. But over time, these markings morphed into something far more unsettling. Silhouettes began to emerge, figures that appeared to writhe in anguish, their faces twisted in expressions of despair. I couldn't shake the feeling that these images were somehow alive, absorbing the fear and sorrow of the thousands who passed through this underground labyrinth every day. The first time I saw them, I had been on my way home from class. As I stepped off the train, a chill swept through me. The usual buzz of voices faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to cling to the walls. I spotted one of the graffiti figures, a distorted man reaching out, mouth open in a silent scream. My heart raced as I glanced around, half expecting to see someone else react to the sight, but the platform was deserted. Just my imagination, I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to move forward. But the sensation of being watched lingered, an oppressive weight that bore down on my shoulders. The echo of my footsteps sounded too loud, too hollow, as I made my way toward the exit. Days turned into weeks, and the graffiti only worsened. Each time I returned to the subway, I found new additions, more figures, more details. It was as if they were trying to tell a story, one of sorrow and despair, but I couldn't decipher their message. I heard rumors that workers had tried to paint over them, only to find the images reappearing, even more detailed than before. Why can't they just get rid of it? I heard a woman whisper to her friend as they passed me on the platform. It's just creepy. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Each figure seemed to resonate with a profound sadness, an echo of the struggles faced by countless souls navigating the darkness of their own lives. The subway walls felt like a mirror, reflecting our collective fears back at us. I couldn't help but wonder if these images were a warning, a premonition of something sinister lurking just beyond the surface of our everyday lives. As the days went by, I became increasingly obsessed with the graffiti. I found myself taking different routes, seeking out the more hidden corners of the station where the figures had begun to take shape. One night, as I descended the dimly lit stairs into the underbelly of the subway, a strange noise caught my attention. It was soft at first, a faint whisper that sent chills racing down my spine. "Ethan, help us." I froze, straining to hear. The voice was almost inaudible, a distant plea that felt like it was echoing from the very walls themselves. My heart raced. Who was calling out to me? My instinct screamed at me to turn back, to escape the oppressive darkness, but I felt an inexplicable pull toward the source of the sound. I crept further into the shadows, my breath hitching as I moved closer to the wall. The graffiti glowed faintly under the flickering lights, the figures seeming to writhe and shift as if alive. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of desperate voices. Panic surged within me, battling against my curiosity. What were these figures trying to communicate? Suddenly, the air grew thick with tension. The lights began to flicker more violently, and I could feel an electric charge in the atmosphere, as if the very essence of the subway was coming to life. I stumbled back, fear gripping my throat. The once familiar surroundings had transformed into a twisted, threatening space where reality blurred with nightmare. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. A shadow moved in the corner of my vision, darting just beyond the edge of the light. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just the darkness, closing in around me. The whispers crescendoed into a frantic chant, drowning out my thoughts, each word sharper than the last. "Ethan, join us." I could no longer distinguish between the sounds in my mind and the world around me. My pulse raced as I backed away, only to collide with something solid, a wall, but not the graffiti-covered wall I had been facing. This surface felt different, pulsating with an energy that made my skin crawl. My instinct screamed at me to run, to escape the encroaching darkness. I whirled around, racing down the tunnel, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. Each step echoed in the silence, growing louder as I fled. The shadows loomed larger, reaching out with unseen fingers, grasping for me as I ran. But just as I thought I was free, the whispers intensified, enveloping me in a cold embrace. I stumbled, crashing to the ground, the breath knocked from my lungs. As I lay there, I could feel the oppressive weight of the figures pressing down, their presence suffocating. The darkness enveloped me, pulling me into its depths, and for a moment, I felt utterly lost. My mind raced, frantically searching for a way to escape, to break free from this nightmare. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sound of my heartbeat, the only thing anchoring me to reality. But as the whispers grew louder, I realized the truth. I wasn't just running from the shadows, I was running from myself. I managed to rise to my feet, a surge of determination coursing through me. I had to confront this fear, to face whatever darkness lay within. With one last glance at the twisted figures that had haunted me, I took a deep breath and stepped back into the light. And now was when I saw it, a final, grotesque figure emerging from the shadows, a silhouette that seemed to consume all light around it. It loomed larger than life, its features indistinguishable, but I could feel its eyes boring into me, piercing through the veil of darkness. I was no longer just a witness to this horror. I was a part of it, entangled in a web of fear that threatened to engulf me whole. As the final whispers echoed in my mind, I knew I had to fight back, to reclaim my place in the world above. But would I be able to escape the haunting grip of the subway? Would I ever truly be free from the shadows that lurked just beneath the surface? My heart hammered in my chest as I stood, paralyzed by the sight of that looming figure. It seemed to absorb all light, a dark vortex pulling me in. I was caught between terror and the desperate need to escape. The whispers swirled around me, a cacophony of pleas and warnings, their words coiling through my mind like smoke. Join us, find the truth. The finality of those words sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled backward, my thoughts racing. What truth? What did it mean to join them? My breath came in ragged gasps as I struggled to make sense of it all. I could feel the walls closing in, the oppressive weight of the subway pressing down on me, suffocating. Instinct kicked in, and I turned to flee. I sprinted down the tunnel, my feet pounding against the cold concrete. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting erratic shadows that danced menacingly along the walls. Each echo of my footsteps felt like a reminder of the darkness I was trying to escape. As I ran, I glanced back, half expecting to see the figure chasing me. But the tunnel was empty, save for the faint glow of the graffiti behind me. Those figures twisted and writhed as if mocking my fear, each one more grotesque than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching, judging my every move. The further I ran, the more the tunnel transformed. What had once been a familiar path became a maze of dread and uncertainty. The walls seemed to pulse, the graffiti shifting into new shapes that taunted me. I could almost hear the figures laughing, their silent screams echoing in my mind. Focus, Ethan, I whispered to myself, trying to banish the panic. You need to get out of here. I took a deep breath, forcing my thoughts to clear. The station was just ahead. I could see the flickering light of the exit sign cutting through the darkness. But as I approached, the whispers grew louder, merging into a single, chilling chant. Help us, help us, help us. The words wrapped around me like a noose, pulling me back toward the shadows. My pulse quickened again, fear clawing at my throat. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the sound was caught in my chest, trapped by the weight of the darkness. I burst into the station, the sudden brightness almost blinding. The bustling crowd that usually filled the platform was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. My heart sank as I realized I was utterly alone. The absence of sound was deafening, amplifying the whispers that continued to echo in my mind. Why is no one here? I thought, panic creeping back in. I scanned the empty platform, searching for any sign of life. But the world felt hollow, as if I had stepped into a different realm, one where the shadows were free to roam, unfettered by the light. As I made my way toward the stairs, I noticed a familiar graffiti creeping up the walls of the station, more vivid and intricate than before. One figure stood out, a woman with hollow eyes, her mouth agape in a silent scream. I felt a pang of recognition. She looked so familiar, as if I had seen her before, maybe in my dreams. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the station into darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. I felt a rush of cold air wash over me, sending chills down my spine. Something was coming. Ethan, the voice was clearer now, more distinct, as if it was right beside me. You have to remember. I turned around, heart racing, but the platform was still empty. I was trapped in this nightmare, cut off from the world above. The shadows seemed to close in around me, and I could feel the weight of the figures pressing against me, urging me to remember something I couldn't grasp. With a surge of adrenaline, I ran for the exit. I pushed through the doors, bursting into the street above. The cool night air hit me like a wave, refreshing yet filled with a sense of urgency. I stumbled onto the sidewalk, the familiar sights of the city a stark contrast to the horrors I had just escaped. But even as I stood there, gasping for breath, I could feel the shadows lingering, whispering just out of reach. I turned to look back at the entrance to the subway, the dark maw of the tunnel gaping at me like a hungry beast. The thought of going back sent a wave of nausea through me, but something tugged at my mind, a sense of duty, of connection to the figures I had encountered. Why? I whispered to myself. Why can't I just forget? But I couldn't. The image of the woman's face haunted me, the anguish etched into her features an unshakable reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. I needed to understand what was happening, to uncover the truth behind the graffiti that had taken hold of the subway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. I had to confront this darkness, to dig deeper into the mysteries that surrounded me. I needed to find out who these figures were, what they wanted, and why they had chosen me. That night, I made a decision. I would return to the subway, but this time with a purpose. I would uncover the secrets hidden within the shadows. I needed to know what had drawn me into this world of despair, to understand the connection that bound me to those figures. And most importantly, I had to find a way to help them, or at least, to free myself from their grasp. As I walked back toward the entrance, determination filled me. I would not be a victim of this darkness. I would be its challenger. The subway awaited, and so did the truth hidden in its depths. The subway entrance loomed before me like a portal to another world. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. My heart raced with both dread and determination. What awaited me below? The whispers echoed in my mind, urging me onward, and I knew there was no turning back. As I descended the stairs, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The familiar scent of damp concrete mingled with something metallic, sending a shiver down my spine. The silence felt heavy, as if the tunnel was holding its breath, waiting for my return. I stepped into the tunnel, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. Each sound seemed amplified, filling the space with an unsettling intensity. I paused, listening closely, straining to hear anything beyond my own heartbeat. But the whispers had faded, replaced by an eerie quiet that felt almost mocking. With each step deeper into the bowels of the subway, I was enveloped by the darkness. My flashlight flickered to life, cutting through the shadows like a knife. The beam illuminated the graffiti on the walls, each figure more detailed and intricate than I remembered. They seemed to shift and writhe, almost alive, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. What are you trying to tell me? I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence responded with an unsettling stillness, the only movement the flickering light from my flashlight. I pressed on, my feet moving with a mix of trepidation and purpose. I recalled the figure of the woman from before, the one with the hollow eyes. The memory struck me like a blow. I had to find her, to understand her anguish. Perhaps she held the key to this mystery, a clue that could unravel the darkness lurking in the subway. As I reached a junction in the tunnel, I hesitated. The path to the left was dimly lit, while the right led into an inky blackness that seemed to swallow the light. I felt an instinctual pull toward the left, but something urged me to venture into the darkness. With a deep breath, I chose the right path, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. The air grew colder as I ventured deeper. The silence was almost suffocating, and I felt a sense of isolation settle in. My flashlight flickered again, and I cursed under my breath. I couldn't afford to lose light now, not while I was so close to uncovering the truth. Then I heard it, a low hum, like a distant chant, weaving through the air. The sound sent chills down my spine. It grew louder as I walked, pulling me deeper into the abyss. Each step felt like a descent into madness, the shadows closing in around me. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a wider chamber. I stepped inside, my light revealing strange symbols etched into the walls, ancient runes and markings that pulsed with a faint glow. My heart raced as I realized I had stumbled upon a hidden ritual site. In the center of the chamber lay an altar, covered in dust and debris. The remnants of candles flickered weakly, their flames a ghostly blue. I approached cautiously, my curiosity battling with the overwhelming sense of dread. The air felt charged, electric with unspoken energy. What happened here? I whispered, running my fingers over the cool surface of the altar. It felt alive, vibrating with an unseen force. I noticed a series of photographs scattered around the altar, images of students, faces filled with joy and excitement. But among them was the woman again, her face twisted in despair, as if she were trapped in a nightmare. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder than ever, flooding my mind with a cacophony of voices. They spoke of rituals and sacrifices, of a dark pact forged in desperation. The sound swirled around me, a whirlwind of anguish and fear. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to drown them out, but their cries only grew louder. Help us, save us. I staggered back, heart pounding. The voices melded into a single, desperate plea, and I could feel their pain resonating within me. I could no longer distinguish between my thoughts and theirs. Panic set in as the shadows closed in, surrounding me, swallowing the light. I stumbled toward the entrance, the darkness clawing at my back. I had to escape, to break free from this suffocating grip. But as I turned to flee, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking my path. It was her, the woman with hollow eyes. Her presence was overwhelming, a fusion of sadness and anger. I felt an instinctual pull toward her, an urgent need to understand. Ethan, she breathed, her voice a haunting echo. You must listen. We are trapped. Trapped? I gasped, bewildered. What do you mean? How can I help you? Find the source, she whispered, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. The heart of the darkness lies within. You must confront it. Before I could respond, the chamber began to tremble. The walls shook, dust falling like rain. The altar pulsed with energy, the symbols glowing brighter, casting eerie shadows that danced around us. Time is running out, she urged, her voice growing faint. You have to face the truth. With a jolt, she vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone in the chaos. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I had no choice but to confront the source of this darkness. I needed to uncover the truth behind the rituals, to understand what had transpired in these depths. As the tremors subsided, I felt a newfound resolve. The shadows still whispered, but now their words were a call to action, a challenge to face the unknown. I would find the heart of this darkness and unravel the mystery behind the whispers. With my flashlight flickering but still functional, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. The subway might be a labyrinth of despair, but I was determined to uncover its secrets. The figures, the rituals, the woman, they all held the key to breaking the cycle of anguish. "Let's end this," I muttered to myself, taking my first step back into the depths. The shadows seemed to throng with anticipation, and I knew that I was on the brink of something terrifying. But I also knew that within this darkness lay the truth that would either save me or consume me. I pressed onward, my heart pounding with each echoing footstep. The tunnel ahead twisted and turned, a dark maw leading me deeper into the unknown. The faint glow from the symbols on the walls faded, replaced by an oppressive darkness that felt like a living entity closing in around me. As I walked, I replayed the woman's words in my mind: find the source, the heart of the darkness. What could that possibly mean? Was it a location, a person, or something more abstract? The questions churned within me, mixing with a growing sense of urgency. I had to uncover the truth before it swallowed me whole. The air grew thick and heavy, each breath a struggle as I navigated the labyrinthine passages. My flashlight flickered again, casting long shadows that twisted into grotesque shapes. The whispers returned, more insistent this time, as if they were guiding me, pushing me towards something crucial. I strained to catch the words, but they slipped through my fingers like smoke. Suddenly, I noticed a faint light ahead. My heart leaped. I quickened my pace, the shadows clinging to me like a shroud. As I approached, the light grew stronger, revealing a wide chamber filled with strange artifacts and remnants of rituals long forgotten. The chamber was circular, the walls adorned with faded murals depicting scenes of worship and despair. I could make out figures standing around a central pit, their faces twisted in fear or ecstasy. The atmosphere was charged with an eerie energy, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. In the center of the chamber was an altar, more elaborate than the last. It was constructed from dark stone, etched with the same glowing symbols I had seen earlier. A deep hum resonated from it, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. I approached cautiously, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. On the altar lay an ancient book, its pages yellowed and frayed. The cover was adorned with the same symbols, pulsating with a sinister light. My heart raced as I reached for it, the air crackling with anticipation. What knowledge lay within its pages? As I opened the book, a rush of cold air swept through the chamber, extinguishing my flashlight. I was plunged into darkness, the whispers rising to a cacophony of voices, overlapping and chaotic. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled to turn the flashlight back on, but it was dead, leaving me blind and vulnerable. The voices grew louder, swirling around me, enveloping me in their despair. "Help us, save us, find the heart." Their cries echoed in my mind, blending with my own fear. I could feel the shadows pressing in, coiling around me like a serpent ready to strike. Just as I was about to succumb to panic, a flicker of light returned, illuminating the chamber once more. The book lay open, the pages flipping on their own as if caught in a breeze. I stumbled back, watching in awe and terror as the symbols glowed brighter, casting an otherworldly light. One page caught my eye, an illustration of a figure surrounded by flames, its face obscured. The words beneath it were written in a language I couldn't understand, but the emotion was palpable, a blend of anguish and fury. I felt drawn to it, compelled to understand. "Who are you?" I whispered into the darkness. "What happened here?" The whispers responded, swirling around me with an intensity that threatened to drown me. "We were forgotten, abandoned," the voices echoed, laden with sorrow. "We gave everything, for the knowledge, for power." Suddenly, a vision flashed before me. Students gathered in this very chamber, eyes wide with excitement, chanting in a forgotten tongue. They were seeking something, a connection to the past, to a power beyond their comprehension. But something had gone horribly wrong. As the vision faded, I gasped for breath, my chest tightening. I had to understand what had happened. The figure in the illustration, was it one of them? Or was it something darker, something that had been unleashed in their quest for power? "Stop!" I shouted into the void, my voice shaking. "You have to show me." "What do I need to do?" The light from the book flickered again, illuminating a path deeper into the chamber. I hesitated, but the urgency surged within me. I had to know. I had to confront whatever lay at the heart of this darkness. With trepidation, I stepped toward the illuminated path, the whispers growing fainter but still present. The air shifted, growing colder as I ventured deeper into the chamber. I could feel the shadows stirring, alive and watching, as if they were aware of my presence. The tunnel opened into another larger chamber, this one dominated by a massive stone structure at its center. It resembled a twisted heart, pulsating with an ominous energy. The symbols from the book adorned its surface, glowing in a rhythmic pattern that seemed to sync with the pounding of my heart. I approached cautiously, my breath hitching in my throat. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing down on me. This was it, the heart of the darkness. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the structure began to crack, fissures forming along its surface. I stumbled back, fear surging through me as the whispers erupted into a cacophony of rage. "You shouldn't have come here," they screamed, their voices a tempest of fury and despair. I turned to flee, but the shadows surged forward, coiling around my legs, dragging me back toward the heart. "You cannot escape," they howled, the darkness closing in. My vision blurred as I fought against the pole, desperately clawing at the ground. "Let me go!" I screamed, my voice drowned in the chaos. I had to confront it. I had to face whatever this was. With a surge of determination, I pushed against the darkness, feeling the energy of the heart pulse around me. I could see the figures from the murals emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted in anguish. They reached for me, their eyes pleading. "Help us, break the cycle." In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption. I had to confront the darkness within myself, within this place. I focused on the heart, the pulsing energy that seemed to echo the very essence of despair. With a deep breath, I gathered my strength. "I won't let you control me," I shouted, channeling all my fear and anger into my words. The heart pulsed violently, the shadows writhing around me in a frenzy. "Face your truth," the voices cried, their intensity growing. The room trembled as I confronted the heart, the very source of this darkness. I could feel the weight of their anguish, their desperation. "I will not abandon you," I declared, feeling the power surge within me. In that instant, the shadows recoiled, the heart's pulsating energy beginning to stabilize. The whispers softened, transforming into a chorus of relief. I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a release of the pent-up anguish that had bound them for so long. As the chamber settled, I gasped for breath, the darkness retreating. The heart's glow dimmed, transforming into a gentle light that filled the space with warmth. I had faced the darkness and emerged on the other side, but at what cost? I glanced around, the figures now calm, their faces no longer twisted in fear. They nodded, gratitude shining in their eyes. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but the reality of what had transpired settled in. I had uncovered a dark legacy, a connection to a past that would haunt me forever. But as I turned to leave, a final thought pierced my mind. This was only the beginning. I had faced the heart of darkness, but the shadows still lingered. There were more secrets to uncover, more truths hidden beneath the surface. With renewed determination, I stepped back into the shadows, ready to face whatever awaited me in the depths of the subway. The journey was far from over, and I knew I had only just begun to unravel the mysteries that lay ahead. As I stepped away from the heart of darkness, the air felt lighter, yet a lingering unease clung to me like a shadow. The gentle glow of the altar had transformed the oppressive gloom into a twilight ambience, yet I was acutely aware that this was merely a temporary reprieve. The whispers, once chaotic and menacing, now lingered at the edges of my consciousness, soft but persistent, like echoes of a forgotten melody. I retraced my steps through the chamber, my senses heightened. The murals on the walls, now bathed in the fading light, revealed more details than I had noticed before. The figures depicted were not merely worshippers, they were intertwined, their bodies merging and splitting, each moment suspended in a cycle of ecstasy and agony. I felt a strange connection to them, as if their emotions were woven into the very fabric of this place, and I could almost hear their stories in the flicker of the light. As I approached the tunnel leading back to the surface, the air grew colder again, a chill that seeped into my bones. I turned my head, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but the path was empty. The sense of isolation pressed down on me, each footfall echoing against the stone walls, reminding me of my solitude. Suddenly, the whispers returned, now forming words that danced just out of reach. Find us, remember us, they wrapped around me, clinging to my thoughts like vines. Who were they? What did they want from me? The urgency in their voices tugged at my heart. I had to understand. I needed to uncover the truth that had been buried within these walls. With a deep breath, I stepped into the next chamber. It was smaller, more intimate, and at its center stood a stone pedestal. Upon it rested a collection of artifacts, old candles, brittle parchments, and an array of peculiar symbols. My pulse quickened as I examined each item, feeling a deep sense of history radiating from them. I picked up a candle, its wax cracked and discolored, yet it bore the same markings as the glowing symbols. Could it have been used in the rituals? I felt a strange compulsion to light it, to see if it would awaken something within this space. But a nagging doubt held me back. What if it drew forth whatever had been contained here? As I pondered, the ground trembled slightly, a low rumble resonating through the chamber. The shadows flickered as if alive, shifting in response to an unseen force. The echoes of the past were growing louder, the whispers converging into a singular voice, urgent and demanding. Remember, remember the sacrifice. A vision surged forth, unbidden. I saw students, much like myself, gathered in this very chamber, their faces lit by candlelight. They were chanting, faces flushed with excitement and fear. They sought power, knowledge, something that had been lost to time. But as the chant reached its crescendo, their expressions twisted, fear overtaking their enthusiasm. I saw shadows clawing at them, pulling them into the darkness. The realization struck me. They had unleashed something far beyond their control. No! I gasped, stumbling back. I was not just an observer, I was entwined in their story. Their fate was tied to mine, the echoes of their actions reverberating through time. I had to find a way to break this cycle, to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. Resolutely, I turned back to the pedestal. If the candle had been part of their rituals, perhaps it held the key to understanding. With trembling hands, I struck a match and ignited the wick. The flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow that pushed back the shadows momentarily. The air shifted, a palpable tension wrapping around me as the candle's light grew steadier. The whispers intensified, now swirling in a harmonious tone. Remember, awaken, they beckoned, a chorus urging me to delve deeper into the past. The flame flickered, revealing hidden carvings along the walls that I had missed before, stories etched into the stone, tales of sacrifice and redemption. Each carving depicted a different scene, a different moment in time. There were images of celebrations, of scholars dedicating their lives to knowledge. But lurking beneath the surface were darker motifs, figures bound in chains, their faces contorted in pain, shadows looming over them. It became clear the quest for knowledge had come at a great cost. As the candle burned brighter, I felt a connection to the students from my vision, an understanding that transcended time. They had sought knowledge, but in their pursuit, they had unwittingly opened a door to the unknown. A chill swept through me as I realized that the same fate awaited anyone who dared to delve into the depths of this place without heeding the warnings etched in stone. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The whispers crescendoed, swirling into a tempest of sound. "You must finish what we started," they cried, echoing off the walls. I felt a surge of energy coursing through me, as if the very essence of the chamber was awakening, urging me to act. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candle's flame. Darkness enveloped me once more, and I stood frozen, heart racing. The shadows began to gather, forming shapes that swirled and danced around me. Panic rose in my throat, but I fought against it, focusing on the voices and the stories they carried. "I will not abandon you," I declared into the void, summoning every ounce of strength within me. "I will remember you." As if my words were a spell, the shadows halted. The air crackled with tension, and the whispers transformed into a singular, powerful voice. "Remember the sacrifice, break the chains." I closed my eyes, allowing the memories of those who had come before me to wash over me. Their hopes, their fears, their desperate pleas for understanding, they were all intertwined with mine. I felt their pain and their longing for redemption. In that moment, I understood the weight of their legacy. With newfound determination, I took a step forward into the darkness. "I will carry your stories," I vowed, feeling the energy of the chamber pulse around me. "I will ensure that your sacrifice is not forgotten." The shadows began to recede, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. The atmosphere shifted, no longer suffocating but instead filled with a fragile hope. I sensed a path opening before me, a way forward into the unknown. As I moved deeper into the tunnel, I knew I was on the cusp of something monumental. The echoes of the past would guide me, but it was up to me to navigate the shadows and illuminate the truth. The journey was not just about survival. It was about honoring those who had come before and seeking a way to break the cycle that bound us all. With each step, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I would not let their stories fade into obscurity. I would uncover the secrets hidden beneath the surface, and in doing so, I would reclaim the power that had once consumed them. The darkness may linger, but I was determined to bring the light. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.